Hello, welcome to Empire Watch Weekly Live. I'm Ileana Chan with my co-host Sara Vivacqua. Every week on the Empire Watch Weekly Live, we break down the weekly news through an anti-imperialist lens. Every Friday, 12 p.m. UTC, that's 9 a.m. BRT, that's Brasilia time, and 8 p.m. Beijing. So please share, comment, like, subscribe. And also, I have an announcement to make. We are at 199 patrons on Patreon. So could we have one more? We could have 200. We're just trying to diversify our platform, so that's why. But
yeah.
Hi, Sara. How are you today?
Hi. Oh, I think we have a great interview today with Paul Larudee. Paul Larudee, who is the founder of the flotilla. I was detained with him in Egypt with El-Sisi as we were trying to get food aid to Gaza. I think Paul Larudee is he's also an advisor on Iran to very influential independent media. I'm not sure if I can name them here, but Paul Larudee is a very, very important figure in the anti-imperialist scene in the US. So stay with us. We are going to talk about Iran and in depth with him. He's half Iranian. He speaks Farsi. He speaks Arabic. It's a very significant political analyst who was very deeply connected with Syria. And yeah, I think it was a great interview. And also we're going to talk about the deluge of this cesspit called.
Before we mentioned that, I just wanted to say I'm going to say hello to people.
Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to say about the Paul Larudee interview. We also had a big argument on that interview. I think it was a really interesting one. It comes up a lot on this thing. It's about Israel and the U.S. and how Israel fits into the U.S. empire. So we're at it again, but we'll get there. We will get there. However, I just want to say hello to our
Go ahead, Ileana.
Some of them, like I recognize some names, like Rafael from Brazil.
Always here. Thank you, Rafael, for being our loyal friend.
And ode to John Friedel. Yes, he's from the Insane Asylum, aka the USA. Our condolences, but thank you for joining us from the US. It's pretty early there, I think. So kudos to you. And also he's asking, or they're asking, Sara, do you work with the Samir Project?
No, I don't. No. Is it a suggestion for the show? If we're happy to take suggestions from the public, if this is a suggestion.
Yeah, we don't know. We haven't heard of that. But happy to hear about it. So yeah, so please tell us in the comments what you mean by that and if it's something we should look into. Thank you. Okay, cool. So today we have
a second major announcement, Ileana. Don't you remember that one in March? What? Shall we do a spoiler? What's going on in March?
Okay, that's right. That is true. We have another announcement. We are going to be launching a new weekly live that is called Global South Rising. So it will be not predominantly, it will be focused on the Global South news items. And we're really excited to be launching that, but in March. So we're excited. We'll give more details closer to the date of launch. But
so we're going to have 2 weekly lives and the Global South Rising with focus on how the multilateral world is building up. In here we talk about the empire, what's the empire doing, and then we're going to talk about how is the multilateral world shaping as the empire falls and shambles. And we have a very special person joining our Empire Watch, which is João Amorim. João Amorim is a filmmaker, a Brazilian-American filmmaker, and he's also, he I don't know if you can say this, but I think it's quite relevant that his father is the main advisor for the President Lula on foreign policy. Of course, he's going to talk about his own views and his own comments. It has nothing to do with the view of his father, but he's someone who's very in tune with the diplomatic world. He's also very diplomatic if compared to us, right?
Oh yeah, and so that's the other thing that we do have to emphasize with the weekly lives. It is more like a discussion where we talk about our opinions, and then we sort of view the propaganda and the news items that we're getting, from mainstream media, especially for this show, which is different, going to be a little bit different from the Global South Rising. It is our opinions, and so sometimes we have arguments, and we change our minds as well. So it's not really. Like definitely, it's not like, okay, I say this one week and I'll never, ever, ever evolve on my talking points. But our foundation is anti-imperialist, and our foundation is how do we actually build a multilateral world? That's like the main important part of it, and obviously there's not one way to do it. So hence the differences in opinions. So that's what these shows are about. If you want something that's a little bit more in depth on a specific topic where I talk to people, and I do not argue with them generally. It is like Global Majority for Peace.
Exactly. Yeah.
Different format. Yeah, it's a very different format.
Yeah. So we have within Empire Watch umbrella, now we're going to have 3 different angles on, and they are all complementary and very important. And yeah, I'm very happy that we're launching this. It's really welcome. But to the point, Ileana, what we are going to talk about today, I think we're going to leave to the end the deluge of the cesspit, right, of the empire called Epstein files, because there's so much to talk. But what are we talking about today?
Do you want to do that at the end? I was thinking we could start with that, but
as you please, yeah.
Yeah, so everyone
people in the comment, how should we start? Should we start with Epstein files? Because this is so never ending. I'm afraid we won't cover the other topics. Let's.
Right. Okay. You have a good point there. We might start with other. We might start with the other news items then, because, like you said,
and those are new items that nobody's talking about, and they are incredibly relevant, Ileana. I think we should go through them first. It's just my humble opinion, but we can change if you want.
Yeah, okay, we can. We'll see if anybody cares about it in the comments. And, but we'll go ahead. So everyone is talking about, obviously, the Epstein files. It's everywhere. Also, the North Korea is supposedly executing teenagers. I want to get into that because that is like an incredible look at a propaganda playbook, a very familiar one. So people are talking about that, but in a very superficial way. And then everyone should be talking about, I'm now realizing this, everyone should be talking about section. Maybe that could be adjusted, but Japan is calling a snap election. So we're going to look at that, like what that means a little bit more, since we have been following Takaichi for the past few months. And China's diplomatic meetings between Xi and Putin. They did a video call. We're going to look into that. Uruguay also, the prime minister of Uruguay, the head of state of Uruguay visited Beijing. And then Xi and Trump also had a call. So we're going to be looking at that too. And then we will definitely end with our interview with Paul Larudee, which I'm quite excited about, because I will also be showing you a counter argument, because I don't think I properly presented my arguments from Batul Subeti. So I'll add in some clips.
And one thing there I thought was very important in the Paul Larudee interview is, through his closeness with Assad al-Bashar, I always mix up, former ousted president of Syria, he was talking about the incredible propaganda on Syria. And I think this is something that we talk little about, and how this propaganda works for intervention, right? This was one aspect, I think, that his interview covers, which is very, very important. And we talked to him about Iran in depth. What is next for Iran? What is next? Why Trump is no longer going for Iran. So he's breaking down all of that. And I think it was a very important interview, and it's not something that you see usually there. Because as you say, John Meschmeyer is a great commenter, but he does have the imperialist views at times. And I think Paul Larudee is a true anti-imperialist, so it was very refreshing to see his point of view. So stay with us for the special interview for Paul Larudee, and also, of course, for the incredible Epstein files and how it hit the royal family in Britain, the royal family in Norway, and Mandelson. We're going to talk about who is Mandelson in the UK and how analysts say Starmer will not resist. Starmer, the Prime Minister of the UK, will likely fall. And we're going to get into that and the fact that he knew that Mandelson was involved with Epstein. So stay with us.
Okay, so what do we want to start with? And hello, Vivacqua.
Let's start with North Korea. I'm curious to see
that. Your friend from Brazil, Sara Vivacqua, is in Barassi?
Oh, Barassi. Barassi is a good friend of mine. Thank you for coming
in the comments. Hello. So what should we start with? Should we start with,
I think with North Korea? I think nobody's talking about this. Let's dismantle this piece of propaganda. Ileana, nobody better than you.
Yeah, let's talk about North Korea, because I have not really been seeing people I have not been seeing people cover it the right way. I've just been seeing very superficial takes on it. So I'm going to pull up. Let me try to pull it up, though.
I can open up here for you if you want. I just don't have TikTok. You have to get the TikTok video, but I can do for you the other ones.
It's okay. I can do it. All right. So here we go. We're going to, just to set this up, we'll look at the propaganda around North Korea right now. And here we go.
They are said to be publicly executed for watching Squid Game or listening to K-pop. New testimonies from Amnesty International reveal that Kim Jong-un is unleashing his wrath on youngsters caught consuming foreign media in his war on South Korean TV and music. Interviewees described being forced as schoolchildren to attend the public executions as part of their ideological education. Kim even sentenced 3 of his sister's high school friends to years-long labor camps in the late 2010s for watching South Korean TV.
So that is incredibly huge accusations at a time when Jeffrey Epstein files are hitting, the media sphere. We're also getting this report from supposedly from North Korea about them executing teenagers for watching South Korean dramas and listening to K-pop. And I want to talk about how, yes, exactly. So this is kind of the media coverage. You can see publicly executing kids, etc. Right? That is the media sphere right now. And I kind of want to show you how it goes from one article, which is basically from Amnesty International. And now Amnesty International is something that, oh no, did we lose Sara? We lost Sara. I hope she'll come back. I'm sure she'll come back. But Amnesty International is something that I've covered before. It is something that people do tend to think of as, something that, yes, exactly. Thank you for one of our commenters already saying, if it comes from Amnesty International, it's guaranteed to be BS. Absolutely. But Amnesty International does have sort of a good international reputation, which is something that we have to debunk, of course. We're just talking about Amnesty International here, and I'm going to pull up the article.
I have it here. Ileana, Amnesty International is not what it used to be. At the time of dictatorship in South America in the 70s, Amnesty International played an enormous role in helping political persecuted people, friends of my parents. And the first time I saw the posters and knew of Amnesty International was when I was looking at my mom's wardrobes and I found a poster, "Don't allow God me to die without coming home." And Amnesty International was a very important group supporting political prisoners, truly political prisoners. But if you see on the 2000s, there is a shift. this Amnesty International is co-opted by corporate machines, by the corporate language, by the corporate decisions. Later, we need to say that Amnesty International refused to put Julian Assange as a political prisoner, one of the most iconic political prisoners of our times. This should be above discussion. Amnesty International has, I recall vividly, was calling for the invasion of Syria in the name of women's rights in 2000, and was circulating a huge petition, invade Syria, for intervention in Syria. I vividly remember that. So I was part of International Amnesty in Germany, and they were refusing to talk about Palestine because they could, rub Israel the wrong way. Not only that, they were thinking about engaging third-party services for collecting money. The money was traditionally collected by people who believed in the cause. We would go with stands in different places. We would ask money within a politicization campaign, within an information campaign. Now you have just people walk in your door and ask for money without any political engagement. This is a project of depoliticization, but at the same time, leaning on their past good work. So Amnesty International is not what used to be. Of course, there are good people in Amnesty International. I interviewed once the director of the Argentina, but what kind of weight do they have in the huge picture? Amnesty International became today a bit of what co-opt establish who can be a political prisoner and who could not. And the parameters are clear. It's a Western, almost propaganda machine.
It is a propaganda machine because even if it does sometimes rightly condemn war criminals, sometimes the fact that it's trying to maintain this idea that it is impartial, that it is, it is a Western imperial tool. If it was always wrong on everything, it wouldn't have the reputation that it has. So that's why it's like so much more dangerous to have like this balance. And that's just a propaganda tool. We also have to look at Amnesty International's funding. It is Open Society, which is George Soros, and the Ford Foundation. Now, the Ford Foundation comes up over and over and over again because it is one of the biggest foundations for pushing so-called democracy and freedom. And essentially, it allows the mechanisms of color revolutions and regime change all over the world. So that is what the funding.
And Barasi, who's in, we have a common friend who is a researcher in the hybrid war lab in Rio de Janeiro. And what they are saying, Ford Foundation, they made a study on how Ford Foundation infiltrated in the left-wing independent journalism in Brazil, co-opting them. So now they have a very different tune, like they are against Venezuela. They would definitely replicate this as left-wingers. So it's a project, you co-opt traditionally means there are real left-wing. It's just like what you did in the Labour Party. You transform the Labour Party in a Clinton-esque club. And that's the project of Ford Foundation and Soros. That's why they are financing. Financing is a very efficient way to co-opt, depoliticize,
I would say it's not really depoliticized because it does harken back to the Cold War and the anti-communist Washington anti-communist regime. It's just that it's been so successful.
Yeah, but propaganda isn't a form of depoliticizing people. If you are moving them through a propaganda, you are making them apolitical because they are just following a script of something bigger. They are not really asking and questioning and seeing the macro structures of things. I think it's a very good tool of depoliticization, and they will give you people the impression that all governments are rotten, so, and the people start not to believe in politics, and this is a great, great, great way of fascism rising. I think they are horrific, to be honest with you. I'm very scared of this type.
They're an imperial tool, so we can see they are horrific. And as we go into the Epstein files, we'll see just how horrific the imperialists.
Exactly.
But as we're talking about this, I just want to sort of show.
Right.
So this was posted on 4th of February, 2026, right? And this is really important to look at how propaganda works. Because of this one article by Amnesty International, we now have scores and scores of other sorry, this is not the right one, but if we just like search in North Korea, we're going to have scores and scores of headlines talking about now they moved on, but essentially it was like executions, etc. So you will see from when I go up here that basically it goes from 1 day away, executed. See, now it's the Independent. So it goes from Amnesty International 2 days ago to stupid like tabloids like The Sun, Daily Mail, etc. Things we don't take seriously. And then it goes to things like
I think I have here the one you wanted to show is this one, isn't it?
Yeah, but you can see here the newest one is the Independent 35 minutes ago. So you're seeing how propaganda proliferates from one single source. But if we look at the single source, which is the Amnesty International article again, like if we go back here, we can see, for example, I'm going to read out from there because I'm just going to sort of establish that even like, okay, so granted, we don't have any independent journalism on this. It's not like I went to North Korea to do, research on this particular thing, but I want us to like look at the source and examine how it all started because it's so, I'm going to put it up if I can just remove
It's incredibly prolific and the level of consensus, right?
Yeah, so it started from here and like, let's just look at the claims on this. I'm going to read it here that basically there are two main claims for this entire barrage of propaganda comes from their first source, apparently, is Radio Free Asia. I don't know where it is here, but Radio Free Asia. Yeah, here we go. Radio Free Asia separately documented an execution in 2021. So taken together, these reports. Okay, so first of all, I could not find this original Radio Free Asia document, but I want to give some sort of like context for what Radio Free Asia is, because it is one of those very, very clear U.S. propaganda fronts. It was started in 1951 by the CIA, and here I have the actual CIA document.
Oh, wow.
Here. Okay, so we have the actual document. So this was in 1951. It was started by the CIA here to determine the future course of the internet. This is like from the CIA.gov reading room. So it's a CIA.
How did you get that, Ileana? Very impressive.
Well, it is actually available on the CIA.gov. So it's just like publicly available, right? Mm-hmm. So this is the Radio Free Asia. It was in 1951 that they started it. Then it was sort of shut down in the 50s because it wasn't really taking off during that time. But then it was relaunched in 1996 by the Clinton administration. So the Clinton administration restarted it in 1996 under the Broadcasting Board of Governors and now the U.S. Agency for Global Media. And here we can see the official Congress document on that, that it actually is, again, an arm. And so this is an official arm here of U.S. propaganda. Okay, so it's here, the U.S. Agency for Global Media. So this is what funds Radio Free Asia. All right, so it says here that the modern U.S. government funded international broadcasting began during World War II with the creation of Voice of America and continued throughout the Cold War period with Radio Free Europe broadcasting. So there's Radio Free Europe, there's Radio Free Asia, broadcasting behind the Iron Curtain, etc.
It's unbelievable, the names, right? Free Asia, Rio
Exactly.
Asia, just
Europe.
how they coined the terms, you know, open democracy.
Exactly. Like once you have those terms, everything's
You should be
down.
scared. Yeah.
Everything is opposite day. But yeah, so back to here, we kind of want to look at the here it goes. This whole thing. So this entire article is based on one source that is was CIA and is really US propaganda. And apparently here you go here. Amnesty International conducted 25 in-depth individual interviews with North Korean escapees in 2025. But the group included 11 individuals who fled North Korea between 2019 and 2020, with the most recent departure in 2020, meaning that out of all the 15 people, what a huge sample size. I mean, that's not a huge sample size at all. 11 of them, only the most recent departure was 6 years ago. So it's kind of absolutely insane that they are now reporting this as if this is like new breaking news. That is,
I see. So they're recycling the arguments.
They're recycling the argument. They're making it new.
Especially now, they need to point fingers to, because who is not in the Epstein files? He's not in the Epstein files. Hugo Chavez was not in the Epstein files. Maduro is not in the Epstein files. Lula is not in the Epstein files. Claudia Sheinbaum is not in the Epstein files. Gustavo Petro is not in the Epstein files. C is not in the Epstein files. So now they need to create distractions.
Yes, I mean, exactly. When they say that Putin, and we're going to go over that when we go over the Epstein files, when they say
Putin is not in the Epstein files, the Telegraph is trying to smear him because of a Russian hat.
Well, one of the reading, when we'll get to the Epstein files, one of the readings of the incorrect headlines again is saying like, oh, Putin was in the Epstein files, 1,000 references. But the thing is that those Epstein files include references to headlines, to subscriptions, to like, articles, etc. It's not, he didn't necessarily meet with. And actually, there's a really interesting video that we'll show later where
the Queen is in the files. I had a look how the Queen's is pictured in the files. It was like they are making fun of the Queen. There are headlines on the Queen, for instance. So the mention in the files, what is the content? Is it a direct link? Is it a private conversation, or is it just a news headline?
It's just like a news headline, exactly.
Yeah.
So just to finish off this, I think this is again recycling old news. And they're trying to put here an Amnesty International thing that this is this is because of the introduction of the 2020 Anti-Reactionary Thought and Culture Act, which this is quoted from Amnesty International, which defines South Korea content as rotten ideology that paralyzes people's revolutionary sense. That is correct. I mean, that is a thing with they're saying that, oh my God, North Korea has this anti-reactionary thought and culture act. And how dare they say that South Korean content is rotten ideology that paralyzes the people's revolutionary sense with no, this is actually a good act, I would say, because they're protecting their revolutionary movements in North Korea. And if you look at South Korean propaganda, South Korean media, it is very much a part of the US empire type of content. So it would be anti-revolutionary. It also is illegal. It was illegal. I don't know if it is anymore, to say anything positive about North Korea and South Korea. So you can understand why all their media space, their entertainment would be actually anti-North Korea propaganda in South Korea. So it's not really necessarily a bad thing to have a sort of culture act. Now, the other stuff about it being executions, about forced labor, like I'm saying, if you're going to make such huge accusations like that, then you have to bring the evidence. You can't just say that you interviewed 15 people, that
anonymous sources. They love the anonymous sources.
Anonymous sources that haven't even been there for at least 6 years. Some of them could have been away from there for 15 years, for as much as we know, right? So even the most recent supposed escapee was 6 years ago. And it's only 15 people. Like, how can you make these types of claims? Like, it's obviously in bad faith, but I just wanted to debunk it and also debunk Amnesty International.
But before you move on, I think we need to talk about the double standards, because we have the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention in the US. They have a census about young incarceration in the US. So young incarceration in the US is breakdown into, you have youth people under 18 incarcerated and young adults 18-24. And it's crazy, the numbers. So we have 29,300 in residential placement. I'm reading out here, in detention, waiting a court decision, which they shouldn't be long in provisional detention because they don't have a sentence against them. 13,000 committed after sentencing. 15,000, and very young children, 12 or younger, 400 are incarcerated in the US. Yeah, and then we have the young adults, and it's flabbergasting. We
12
have
or under, did you say?
12 or younger, 400. And then we have the young adults. We are talking about here about 170,000 people of age between 18 and 24 in local jails. Yeah. So we would say the total population in this gap of age is around 60,000 people. So we are talking about 25 of the jail population fall into between 18 and 24. I would not be surprised if these people are Black, if these males are Black and poor, because we know how the judicial system works. So the US is one of the countries that after Russia, the most incarcerate people, young people. I don't know if you know, but the Brotherhood, the white supremacist Brotherhood of Texas, and escape the name of me. It's called, I think it's the Aryan Brotherhood of Texas. They were born in jail. You know, this is a brotherhood, a racist brotherhood that is started in jail. They are a drug cartel with white supremacist ideas against the Black population in jail. So the US has death sentence. The US has...
And the US also leads the world in
tortures all over the world. We see this in the WikiLeaks. Torture camps. And the John Kiriakou, the CIA agents who said blew the whistle about the torture camps, was incarcerated for blowing the whistles.
Yeah, and also the United States leads the world in total prison population, accounting for approximately, so over 20% of the global prison population is from the US, which is about like 12 million people. So yeah, obviously the US is like, again, you know, when we talk about American or US exceptionalism, it's always in this arena: prison population, draconian measures, military, industrial complex, etc. That's the only place that they actually excel.
Yeah, and I haven't seen International Amnesty going for any political prisoner of the US. I've never seen this. Have you ever seen this? Of any actions of the US?
I mean,
I'm still to see it.
I mean, like you said, it was a struggle to even get them to acknowledge Julian Assange,
which they did not. As political prisoner, they never acknowledged.
Yeah, I think
in the end they made a campaign but said we can't label him as a political prisoner. Thank you.
Yes, exactly. So yes, we've thoroughly debunked Amnesty International, and now we can move on, I think, right?
Yeah, okay. Let's go.
So let's go, because then eventually we're going to get to Epstein. The next thing is, of course, this is not of course, but Japanese Prime Minister Takaichi. She is, can we pull that up? She is, she's calling for a snap election, and I just want to go through what that kind of means. But I want to show you, actually.
I can do that if you want.
I actually want to show you a TikTok video about her apparent popularity in Japan. So yeah, it's quite scary because, okay, so basically they're predicting a landslide win for the ruling party. Like currently, Takaichi does not have a majority in, I suppose, their parliament, but she's expected to, after the calling for the general election on Sunday, she's kind of expecting to get a majority. She thinks that her party, the Liberal Democratic Party, will likely surpass the 233 seat threshold needed for a majority on its own. If we remember in November, her incredibly controversial remarks about Taiwan, saying that if China invades Taiwan, Japan will see it as a self-defense issue, which is absolutely appalling because obviously Taiwan is part of China, and also Japan actually colonized Taiwan for 50 years and was responsible for 30 million deaths in China due to the fascist imperial forces, Japanese fascist imperial forces. And if you remember the Nanjing massacre, that also happened around that time. So Japan's history with China is incredibly bloody and genocidal. And for her to say something like that about Taiwan is so egregious, off the top egregious. But apparently that they're looking at, or they're claiming that she has the popularity of 90% of young voters. That they are, so here it says here that her approval ratings have been strong since she took power, averaging about 70%, which is incredibly high. If we consider Trump is like, I think at 30% right now or something. But I mean, Trump is Trump. But yes, and also incredibly, especially among younger voters, with more than 90% of Japanese voters aged 18 to 29 showing support for her in several polls. Now, I don't know how accurate these polls are, and I guess we will know by Sunday. But the fact that this is something that they're saying pretty confidently is like absolutely appalling. I'm going to show you as well this video from CNN, which like...
Oh, I'll show you afterwards a video about TikTok, and I think it will be pretty clear where the numbers come from.
Okay, so let's see this. This is what they're saying on CNN.
Fever. So much so that there's even merch for the Prime Minister.
Oh yeah, it's very. It sounds all very organic, isn't it? Popular, organic.
A keychain of the Prime Minister.
What a success!
And these cookies have the U.S. President Donald Trump on them too. Conservative leader Sanae Takaichi has built a surprisingly strong fan base.
This is probably a crowdfunding from the Japanese public. All the merch.
So why is she so popular, especially among a demographic that usually has low voter turnout? It comes down to her social media. In just 3 months as Prime Minister, she's racked up a massive online following, posting viral moments of her at work, like meeting South Korea's president, Italy's Prime Minister, and President Trump, who just endorsed her, calling her a, quote, strong, powerful, and wise leader. Supporters say these moments make her feel accessible.
SNS でいっぱいサナちゃんの活躍とかが出てきていっぱい働いてる姿とか笑顔が可愛いなと。
In her short time in office, there hasn't been much in terms of policy. Relations with China have soured and the yen continues to slide. Even so, some polls put her approval ratings among voters in their 20s at over 80%. I'm at a campaign rally right now where the Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi has been speaking, and there are thousands of people out here.
Well, Ileana, I'm really sorry. I don't know. We'll see in the polls. It's very interesting to say she has support, especially at those that doesn't come to vote. That's already a red flag. And this amount of merch, it feels so organic, isn't it? How organic, and probably crowd-funded, this whole merch propaganda. Sorry to interrupt you, but I cannot... TikTok. How we know about bots, but do we know who owns TikTok? Let's see what Netanyahu says about TikTok. I think it's very interesting to hear him talking about TikTok, and then I'll explain that to you guys.
Important purchase that is going on right now is Let's go. Number one.
Then we get
Yeah, and this is a very interesting. So you see here Netanyahu saying that he considers his own purchase. He referred as our purchase, TikTok. And what is the background to this? So Double Down News that we just saw with Loki there, he was saying that Epstein and Ehud Barak was looking for cyber opportunity, high-tech opportunities, and they invested Ehud Barak, former minister of Israel, possibly alleged the rapist of Virginia Giuffre. So Virginia Giuffre tells that she was raped anally, orally, and the regular rape, and until she was bleeding, and she said it was a powerful prime minister. So there are a likelihood she is mentioning Ehud Barak. So Ehud Barak founded a spy firm called Toka. That's what Double Down News revealed. And he launched this with Jeffrey Epstein. And Andreessen Horowitz was one of the main investors of Toka. He was also who funded Trump. Horowitz is also the owner of TikTok, which Netanyahu refers as our purchase. It goes all full circle. Look who is behind the propaganda machine. We have an elite that possesses this propaganda machine, inflates the numbers, and propagandized people. And it's not unlikely that the Japanese population is not very politicized.
I mean, TikTok was bought in the US by Larry Ellison a few weeks ago. Like, the handover was made official. So it's even more firmly in Zionist hands in the US. That's separate from international TikTok. But of course, Zionism has infiltrated basically social media across, because they saw that with the genocide being live streamed, what a problem that was for Israel, certainly. But to go back to our thing before we get to Epstein again, I just want to give this background for the Liberal Democratic Party, which, like you're saying, yes, Japanese are pretty depoliticized. I think that's kind of your point. I mean, the issue, though, is that the Liberal Democratic Party, which is the long dominant conservative party, has been in power basically for 67 years. So since 1955 post-war. So they had a gap of like 3 years. So therefore, yes, the Japanese public is pretty depoliticized. Trying to look for any sort of leftist movements or revolutionary factions in Japan is pretty hard. Like, I was trying to look for whether or not there is an upswell at some points or recently, and there doesn't seem to be. If we look, though, at like Takaichi, I think she is moving Japan further right, too. As I said, that she was part of this very revisionist right type of groups. Like, she was aligned with groups like Nippon Kaigi. They do minimize the Nanjing massacre. One of their core goals is to rewrite the Constitution, especially Article 9, which is about restoring of full powers. Yeah, so that's like a huge imperial push, and that's why they are part of the U.S. We do consider them part of the U.S. imperial system, part of the global north. If we look at the hyper imperialism document from Tricontinental, they are considered part of the global north, but they are trying to further integrate themselves into this imperial bloc of the U.S. They also have other core goals like why can't I say the name? Japan's imperial past. So that's basically like any accountability that they did take post-war. They're trying to erase the accountability, downplaying the massacre, trying to say that the soldiers during that time were heroes, etc. And they also are, trying to portray the Japan's, as I said, imperial fascist actions during World War II as like positive. They're trying to re-propagandize that and re-educate into a positive spin on Japan's wartime actions.
Yeah. And I think, Ileana, the fact that we know about Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the first atom bombs put in Japan, which is inexcusable and undefensible, puts Japan on the place of the victim, and that which they were at that time of this explosion of this domestic bomb. But people do not know the imperial and sanguinary history of Japan. People tend to think Japan was this very rural little land that was attacked. They weren't fascist at any point. They weren't imperialist at any point, And I think I don't see in the Japanese society a discussion about their historical legacy and responsibility.
No, I mean,
I might be wrong, but I've never seen this.
I mean, the fact that
No, you're live. You're fine. I can hear you. We can all hear you.
Okay. I'm hearing some sort of echo, which is very annoying. I don't know why. But basically, yes, the fact that I think that Takaichi might have some sort of popularity here, the fact that it's not really fully integrated into the educational system, the fact that they've had this same ruling political party for almost 70 years would suggest that they're not fully reconciled with their role as a fascist imperial power. So it's not looking good for Japan. I mean, in terms of, it's not looking good for Japan or the rest of the world in terms of Japan. I think we'll see next week. We'll announce, I guess, the results of the election. We'll see what happens, but yeah, it doesn't sound very promising, does it?
Well, they're gambling with propaganda. Part of it will work out. I mean, if you have massively this propaganda with merchandise, if she was a K-pop star, a J-pop star, it will work some way, but probably it won't yield the results they want. Let's have a look. And but a question to you: why do they call the snap election? What is the political need to call it?
I think she feels quite confident that she's going to win, or she wouldn't call it.
Okay,
she's get majority. Yeah, because there are some internal issues with the coalition that she's having, but she's obviously she's confident she's going to win, or else she wouldn't call it now, right? So that's the thing. I think she might win, and that just sort of. Well, what can we say about Japan? I think we can leave it there before I say more. But yeah, so now on to I think before we do Epstein, we're just going to do some we've talked about some terrible imperialists so far. We're going to talk about terrible imperialists again, but let's do some slightly more positive news with Russia. And we look at Russia and China. Russia and China strengthening ties, and China's so it's really interesting to see the contrast between how the U.S. is comporting themselves this, last month, and China. China has had so many diplomatic meetings. We talked about the one before. We talked about Canada, and then of course Keir Starmer last week, and then we had Ireland before that, and two others, and then Finland.
Yeah,
exactly. So this week we have a video call between Xi and Putin, which is, I think we're going to cover this, but this is obviously a show to the world about that. And that on that same day, Xi had a call with Trump. So I'm just going to pull that up, but let's just start with how Sky News is covering what Putin tells Xi.
Be prepared. Yeah.
Well, it's actually not bad. They just showed it.
Really? What's going on? 1 second. I'm just going to put this here.
Okay.
My child.
Yeah, I'm just going to play this.
Внешнеполитическая связка Москвы и Пекина остается важным стабилизирующим фактором, готова продолжать самую тесную координацию по глобальным и региональным сюжетам как на двустороннем треке, так и на всех многосторонних площадках в ООН, БРИКС, Шанхайской организации сотрудничества и других, где российско-китайский тандем играет во многом ключевую роль.
So yeah, so sorry, I realized like people listening might not
put
know.
Down the volume and read it again. Put down the volume and read it again.
Okay. How do I do that though?
Here.
Okay, let me do it again because because I think people might not know Russian like me.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, I could translate for us freely.
Okay, so here we go. Putin tells Xi that Russia-China cooperation is stabilizing the world. In a context of increasing global turbulence, the Moscow-Beijing foreign policy alliance remains an important stabilizing factor. We are prepared to continue the closest possible coordination on global and regional issues, both bilaterally and in all multilateral forums as the UN, BRICS, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and elsewhere, where Russia and China tandem plays a key role in many ways. So that's a very clear assertion of their ties, right? And then similarly, we have Xi Jinping's one, which we'll show here.
Now you can pre-translate from Chinese.
And I will, of course, translate by reading the subtitles. So, dear President Putin, my dear old friend, he speaks very slowly. I am very pleased to hold this video meeting with you at the beginning of the new year. Oh, it's Chinese New Year right now, by the way. Today coincides with Li Chun, the beginning of spring in the Chinese New Year. As the first of China's traditional 24 solar terms, Li Chun symbolizes the return of spring, representing new beginnings and hope. On this day filled with positive meaning, I look forward to having in-depth exchanges with my old friend and jointly mapping out a new blueprint for the development of relationships between, what did he say? Okay, sorry. I did not read the last part fast enough. But yeah, so this is a very strong, obviously public show of relations, putting sort of like a united front to the world kind of thing.
I think it's interesting that he says in this new year. So the
new beginnings.
Yeah, because as you say, it's the Chinese New Year of the Horse, which starts on the 17th of February, but they already start on the 3rd of January, the preparations for it. So it's very interesting because he's going not from the Western calendar, but he's going from his own New Year. It's a statement as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Chinese New Year is very significant in China. They actually have one of the longest holidays there, and everything shuts down for the first time, etc. So it's a big deal. And it's the year of the horse, which is a very auspicious year as well, if you believe in stuff like that.
Yeah, tell me about it. Yeah, let's. People need some good news. Why? So it's my year.
Talk about.
No, I love that.
That is not my expertise.
We'll talk privately about the horse here. I'm a horse in the Chinese.
Oh, are you a horse?
Yeah, I'm a horse.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
We should do a reading later. I'm a monkey.
Great. Yeah. A wild one.
A wild horse.
Untamable, yeah.
Okay, so here is this report from Friends of Socialist China, just sort of going over here. I mean, for those of you who don't know Friends of Socialist China, their website, socialistchina.org, it's just a really useful website to look at updates from China. They cover a lot of different things, and they do I think about 7 to 10 articles on China every week. So there's a lot to look at. But so Xi Jinping holds same-day conversation with Presidents Putin and Trump. And I'm just going to read just a few takeaways from this thing, if I can find it. But here you go. So with the Russian official report of their meeting, and I'm going to contrast it with what Xi Jinping says to Trump, but from the Russian official report of their meeting, overall, Moscow and Beijing have been working in coordination with each other on the international stage. It was pointed out that the sides' position on the overwhelming majority of international issues are similar or fully coincide So, again, the strengthening of ties. Of course, Putin and Xi also exchanged views on their country's relations with the United States. Their approaches almost fully coincide, which is evident from their attitude to the U.S. president's initiative for creating the Board of Peace. The president noted that the treaty or measures for the further reduction and limitation of strategic offensive arms is due to expire tomorrow, February 5th, which was yesterday. As you know, on September 22nd, we suggested extending the key quantitative limits for 1 year on a voluntary basis. However, there was no official response from the US. So essentially, this is an important thing, the Treaty on Measures for the Further Reduction of Limitation of Strategic Offensive Arms. What a mouthful. But I think it's clear from this, they're like calling on, they're sort of like calling out the US, the Board of Peace as well, mentioning that, talking about how there's no official response from the US, the acknowledgement that it is really the US that is escalating things, while Russia and China are trying to stabilize things. That is the message from their meeting. And then I think what is significant here too is after this, and if we can find it somewhere down here, Xi Jinping's call with Trump had a decidedly different tone, even while, of course, being incredibly diplomatic. I can't really find it, so I'm just going to remove it, but I'm going to read it because it's a bit distracting, right? So according to the Chinese Foreign Ministry, Xi said, in the new year, I hope to work with you to steer, this is to Trump, I hope to work with you to steer the giant ship of China-US relations steadily forward through winds and storms and accomplish more big things and good things. Just as the US has its concerns, China, for its part, also has concerns. China always means what it says and matches its words with actions and results. If the two sides work in the same direction in the spirit of equality, respect, and mutual benefit, we can surely find ways to address each other's concerns. The two sides should follow the common understandings we have reached, enhance dialogue and communication, manage differences properly, and expand practical cooperation. It is always right to do a good thing, however small, and always wrong to do a bad thing, however small. That's a very different tone to the tone.
Very different tone. It's a very different, especially coming from the Chinese perspective, which is non-interferential. If your enemy is doing something wrong, let them do wrong. If it's strong, no doubt.
It's pretty strong because that's not, generally like, you were saying, diplomacy is just so careful and respectful. And this is saying, it's calling the US out. It's calling the US out.
So in your perspective that knows Chinese, know China very well and US very well, what do you think is the strongest statement in this?
I mean, I am not going to say that I am an expert on Chinese foreign policy, okay? Because
you know the Chinese society, Chinese. From this perspective, what would be the most pungent message there, you think?
I mean, I just think that the way that he says this part, like China always means what it says and matches its words with actions and results. I mean, we know and everybody knows that the US doesn't do that at all. So the fact that he's like saying that, even, it is said in a very diplomatic way. And then the last sentence, it's always right to do a good thing, however small, and always wrong to do a bad thing, however small. It's like, it is calling the US out, because why would you need to say that in a call to
and it's also a dissuasional threat. I don't know if this word exists, dissuasive threat. We don't want to fight, but if we have to fight, we say what we mean and we match with actions.
Yes.
We're not like you, who a big mouth men, they are inconsistent in the actions and consistent only on the violence of the action. We'll measure our consequences, and we're very effective in the way we handle. I think it's all the qualities that the US does not possess.
Exactly.
And China has consistently shown, it is very strong. You know why? Because it's real.
It's real, exactly. And it's, again, huge contrast with Putin and Xi. Also, a huge contrast from what Trump says on the other side. Like, his is like, the relationship with China and my personal relationship with President Xi is an extremely good one. And we both realize how important it is to keep it that way. Like,
Old friend. Putin becomes consistently an old friend, someone that I trust and I have a continuity in the project. Look,
yeah, that's what Xi Jinping says.
This is America's nightmare. China and Russia together.
Yeah, exactly.
This is American nightmare come true.
Well, I think that
if you look at the diplomatic files of the US, diplomatic commentaries, it was always about splitting Russia from China after the Second World War. And they are now bringing them consistently together, two old friends. We used to be friends there, and we are carrying on now.
Yes, exactly. They're in fact closer. So that's why it's funny that to contrast that, like, both Putin and Xi are on the same page with their friendship, apparently, right?
Yeah.
But then when it comes to Xi and Trump, Xi gives this statement about, like, actions must fit words. And then Trump just says this thing on social media as well about his personal relationship, the relationship with China, and my personal relationship with President Xi is an extremely good one. Do you know what I mean? It's like, that's the difference. He's trying to suggest that he has the same level of friendship that Putin has with Xi.
Which, you know, Trump and Putin are no longer, or are not on the same page at all over Ukraine. Trump went to talk to Putin thinking that he could have a new enclave in Europe called Ukraine, which they've been trying. It was a democratic project, which Trump was happy to continue with the Ukraine war. But then he realized, no, sorry, we want military on the ground. There is no sharing with you. That was Putin's message. And of course, the American understanding of it and propaganda of it is that they had Putin and Trump made a decision of spheres of influence. So the propaganda is that Putin will have one sphere of influence along with China and the United States, the Western. No, this is the American reading. Yeah, Putin won on the ground, and he's not negotiating Ukraine with anyone. It was how the problem began. So, and now the US is trying to pretend Latin Americans, is trying to gain Latin America as the zone of influence. I mean, the imperialist here is America for sure.
Yeah, the spirit of power thing is the very John Mearsheimer thing, but he's an imperialist. So he views the entire world stage as an imperialist stage. So he's always claiming that Russia and China have imperialist agendas, when really there's nothing to suggest that. There's no evidence to actually suggest that.
I think there is evidence on the opposite.
Yes.
Plenty of evidence in the opposite direction.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sorry, I have interrupted you again. Well,
no. That was, but we're finally on the last little meeting. I'm sorry to be so patronizing to Uruguay. No, it's not a little meeting. I'm just going to be really quick on it. So basically, the next one is China and Uruguay vow to deepen ties again. So here the leaders meet as nations mark 38 years of relations. And I think they, on the same day, actually 38 years later, President Xi Jinping and Uruguayan President Yumandu Orsi revisited this journey here. So this is, again, you know, another diplomatic meeting that's happening in China. And they actually signed a 19 cooperation document and a joint statement. And the 19 cooperation agreements span trade, technology, environmental policy, green energy, education, institutional coordination. And it's forming one of the most comprehensive bilateral packages that China has concluded with a South American state.
And it's very important because it's exactly the problem of sorry, I gave blank, but Yamandu Orsi is a left-wing president. So she is looking for approximation with the left-wing presidents because they can really offer a more equal understanding, which is America is not our friend. While you're talking, I'm gonna look here for something showing the sphere, how US used to influence Latin America and how much they have an influence now. So this Latin American connection with China is pivotal to go against the imperialist agenda of the US. But carry on, please.
I'm done though. I'm done. So we're done with like China's diplomatic meetings for this week. Like this was literally just this week talking about what they're doing. And I think it just brings a sort of a nice contrast to what we're going to be going into in the next segment, which is the Epstein files.
Yeah, I just want to show this before we go. Look, I was at the MST. MST is the movement of the landless in Brazil, one of the largest social movement in the entire planet. And what they're saying, look, what explains US veracity and aggression. Look, the political, economical landscape, how it dramatically changed. So in your left-hand side, you see in 2000, in blue, how America and China had commercial influence. And then you go fast forward, 19 years later, look China's influence and American losing influence. Economical. We don't say military, we don't say any other type of influence. This is economical influence. Mm-hmm. These in red are countries which the main trading partner is China, trading partner, contractual partner. This is only 2019. Look, we are seeing an incredible difference in 19-year time. It's huge. US should be concerned.
I mean, it is concerned, and that is precisely why, it is like really being overtly imperialist across like Latin America, as we see with Venezuela. Now they're threatening Cuba, which they're saying that it's going to fail in the next 2 weeks, and we're certainly hoping not. But they've cut off the oil from Venezuela to Cuba. We're hoping that Cuba will be okay, but we're going to cover that more in depth, like in the coming weeks. And like you're saying, with Japan, the South China Sea, the Philippines has taken the chair of ASEAN. I mean, this is like the US trying to exert again, and never mind West Asia. We're talking about West Asia, Middle East, Iran. The US is really, as it realizes its power is diminishing, it absolutely is going to be surpassed by China. And this is their only...
It's inevitable.
Yeah, it is inevitable. And they cannot compete with China in any real way because they haven't invested in anything that would compete with China. It's not even like they haven't even tried to genuinely compete with China. And then they're just mad that China surpassed them. They literally have not tried at all. They've sold everything to private interests. So this is their only way forward, is just to be more belligerent. And a lot of their shock and awe tactics are propaganda tactics. They're designed to scare us, and they do scare us. They are scary, but how much it can actually sustain itself in the long term, I'm not sure. Like, we're not even sure if they can defeat Iran, for example. That seems to be unlikely.
According to our invitee, Paul, he thinks it's very, very unlikely. We'll see why. Ileana, before we go to Epstein, I promise this is our last topic, but this is so incredible. We have here Russian Ministry of Defense reveals that U.S. African biolab complex. So we have here a briefing of Major General Alexei Rytishkev. I'm sorry, I don't speak Russian. In December 2024, but this is a news that broke recently. And the main claims is that the US has a biolab network in Africa. So where American specialists are capable of enhancing the pathogenic functions of microorganisms and they are actively operating in Africa and being tested in African people. So the US is I think this is a war aggression. They are.
I mean,
it's
the thing is,
biological presence. It's a military biological presence in Africa with the studies of resistance of pathogenic microorganisms to medical drugs being conducted in 18 African countries, Ileana, funded through the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. You have here a US Army Medical Center testing in 18 countries of Africa on human people, on humans. And who is funding this? The Gates Foundation, the Clinton Foundation, the Pentagon, the US Department of Defense.
So actually, this has not been reported on since early January 2025. And I think that's actually hugely egregious, because it's obviously something that we know the Bill Gates Foundation and Clinton Foundations have been doing across the world. I mean, you know, the Ukraine biolabs, for example, how they connected to that, etc. But yeah, there's like been crickets since this first broke in 2024. It's something that I think should be reported on, to see what the updates are on this. You know, and across the world.
There is a history of that. France testing on Africans, medication. I don't know if you have seen the film, which is a novel by John Le Carré called The Constant Gardener. It denounces exactly that, using African people as guinea pigs for military purposes, and I would say racist, genocidal purposes. We had a huge HIV scandal where people were being contaminated with HIV. I think this was on, I don't remember exactly the date, but it was, I think, about 30 years ago, 40 years ago. In South Africa, we had pharma industry in America testing things on Africans. This is not a novelty, but now you have the Gates Foundation, Clinton Foundation, Pentagon openly doing this again. They haven't stopped in this day and age. In the most,
and there's been like nothing on it, you know.
So people who are under civil wars, are under wars that they are causing, and the genocide incident. These people are perverts. And it's not a coincidence that Bill Clinton and Gates are in the Epstein files. Look at the level of perversion and disgust, using contaminating people with pathogens to test for their military purpose. This should be front and center page everywhere. Where is Amnesty International here?
Exactly. We should be. I mean, I think that's the thing, is that what the Epstein files really shows to us is how, first of all, these people are not, they're not that educated. It's not like they have a lot of intelligence in any way. They're literally like operating the entire imperialist background system in this very ridiculous way. The things that are revealed in the emails, the way they talk about women and children, everything is a product for them to basically enjoy. Every child, every woman, you know, it's like an absolutely despicable revelations. And we've only had 3 million of the, is it 3 million documents? Like 3 million is so much. That is insane.
Yeah, and let me tell you
that's
something.
only half. That's only half.
You touch a very important point, because the U.S. Deputy Attorney General, which is Todd Blanche, he made clear he have omitted from the Epstein files anything, I'm going to quote him, anything that depicts or contain images of death, physical abuse, or injury. What this statement actually shows is the confirmation of death, physical abuse, injury, not to say torture, in those files. And 2.5 million of them have been withheld. So it's extensive. Why they have to withhold in 2.5 million in its integrity? Because let me tell you, as a lawyer that worked for a long time with disclosure, you withhold when there is nothing else you can disclose, because generally you can redact names of victims, you can redact a lot of things, so they have the opportunity to redact. Why there are 2.5 million files or documents that they cannot redact? They have to completely withhold. This is a black hole here.
And they also admitted to removing, let's look at this Trump video, because he says the quiet part out loud as usual. And I think, let's see.
Democrats who were in there. Elon Musk was also in there, and so was your Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, and correspondence that he had with him. Did you read those new files that were published by the Department of Justice?
I have a lot of things I'm doing. A lot of things I'm doing. I don't know. You mentioned 2 names. I'm sure they're fine. Otherwise, it would have been major headlines.
A lot of women who are survivors of Epstein's are unhappy with those redactions that came out. Some of them, entire witness interviews are totally blacked out. Do you think that they should be more transparent?
The fact that they thought they released too much. I heard that, and you tell me something else. I think it's really time for the country to get onto something else. Now that nothing came out about me, other than it was a conspiracy against me, literally, by Epstein and other people. But I think it's time now for the country to maybe get onto something else.
But what would you say to people who feel like they haven't gotten justice, Mr. President?
Something that people care about. What did you say?
What would you say to the survivors who feel like they haven't gotten justice?
You are the worst reporter. No wonder CNN has no ratings because of people like you. She's a young woman. I don't think I've ever seen you smile. I've known you for 10 years. I don't think I've ever seen a smile on your face.
I'm asking you about survivors.
You know why? You know why you're not smiling? Because you're not telling the truth. And you're a very dishonest organization, and they should be ashamed of you.
These are survivors of a sexual abuser.
Shoot the messenger, right? And it's very interesting because originally on 1st of January, there were 5,361 files directly mentioning Trump. So we're talking about Trump direct involvement. In 2nd of February, we have only 4,896 available. So we're talking about not documents, but over 460 files mentioning Trump were removed or deleted. And now Trump is saying that Epstein doesn't matter. Who cares about Epstein?
He's like, now that you found nothing about me, now that you found out, we should move on.
Oh yeah, it's a conspiracy between Epstein and Wolf against me. Oh, come on. I would like to recommend our viewers to watch the Double Down news video. If you could, Ileana, I send it on your WhatsApp. If you could kindly post it them. It's entitled Epstein, Trump, and Mossad. It's worse than you think. And it is worse when you think, because Trump is not someone, according to them, it's not someone just basically a friend of Epstein. They show that there are strong indication that Trump was a co-conspirator with Epstein. A co-conspirator. It's really shocking. We are talking here about Trump, for instance, involved. There are handwritten files, notes showing that Trump was involved in sales of one young woman to Epstein in Saudi Arabia. Trump in the plane of Epstein, private plane, at least seven times. And Trump declared openly, I know this guy for 15 years, and he's a terrific guy, fun to be with. And he likes beautiful women as much as I do. And many of them are on the younger side. So and not only that, I think this video goes to the core of the question, which there is a link between Mossad and Epstein. Mossad was working for Epstein, was very, very important for Mossad to hijack the elite. It was about money. It was about corporate deals. It was about politics. But they will break down how Epstein and Ehud Barak, their very close relationship, They met 30 times in 4 years. I haven't seen my family 30 times in 4 years. Have you? I have not.
Yeah, I mean, this is crazy stuff. Like, I mean, although the Double Down News clip is 10 minutes long, so
no, we
I mean,
can't play here. But I'm saying, put it if you can put it on the comments for people to see. They were saying,
absolutely,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. So they're saying how Epstein coaches Ehud Barak how to make money out of the private sector while he was still defense minister in Israel. And that he should write a list of 40 people that owe him favors in the Israeli government. And one of them is Peter Thiel, Palantir, a company essential for the genocide in Gaza. We're going to go in Palantir later on and show the relationship between Keir Starmer, the UK Prime Minister, and Palantir. So it all goes full circle. It's incredible how things go wove together, are tied up together. You can't dismember it.
Okay, so I actually do have this video of Jeffrey Epstein talking about Tony Blair. I think the thing about this video is that it just shows the way this system works. You're a head of state, and then how do you make money, in this imperial system, which includes, like we've kind of, I don't know, we haven't really talked about it here, but the thing that is like interesting about the revelations and the connections is that we see, for example, some of the more surprising celebrity lifestyle people, but we see how they're integrated into the imperial system. Like Deepak Chopra, Dalai Lama is in the files, Woody Allen, of course, and then Peter Attia, which I was like, Peter Attia is this like person that talks, in scientific, like physical health and fitness and protein. And I have admittedly listened to a lot of his podcasts about how to build muscle. So I'm like, oh my God, he's in the files. He's saying absolutely horrific things, by the way, about women and stuff like that. So, but this is how they get to prominence. There's a network of like this boys club, this worse than a boys club, this sort of imperialist, capitalist elite club of disgusting males, essentially talking about all these things and gathering power and money and connections and contracts. This is how they work. But I can show this particular voice.
Before you go on to this, I think there is a fundamental element of the empire that we need to understand. The British Empire begins with the Brit East India Company. So it's one of the history most horrific monsters. It's a private company that slowly acquired the power of the state through armies, taxation, courts, diplomacy. It's a corporation that eats up the state. And when we talk about corporate coup, this is how the empire works. It's private interests and individuals hijacking the common good, hijacking the state. They see the state as a chartered company, legally private, but politically semi-public. It's a monopoly of privileges, a monopoly of diplomacy, so it's about trade, but then afterward, competition make this trade militarized. So there's a military element to that. And that's the difference between the US, the UK, Europe historically, and somewhat now, you just don't have enough power, and China and other countries in the global
what
south.
You're describing is imperialism, because like if we think about imperialism as the highest stage of capitalism, it makes sense, right? Once you have this monopoly, you have this monopolization of these industries, but it's directly connected to the state in this case.
What I'm trying to say is that this expansion of power is not directed has no state project. There is no project of a nation. It's just a project of expansion of individual.
That is imperialism.
And hijack of but instead of just labeling, I want to talk about the structure of it. This is not what you have in China. You don't have
because it's not
corporation hijacking the state and the common good. And that's the main point why we cannot attribute to China the states of an imperialistic power. We need to understand, I mean, because those labels sometimes they can hide things, and I think it's important was to break down. We are talking about it can be a wonder that we have an Epstein club, that we have the cesspit deluge with those high-level elements, because these are people that hijacked the common good. They hijacked the central idea of state to create a big corporation with military expansion.
I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you at all, but I'm just sort of elucidating that is precisely what imperialism is. And that's why we're anti-imperialist, because to not understand, not that you're saying this, but I'm just saying that a lot of people don't understand what imperialist is. They don't get why we're so against it. And we're against it because the difference, like you're saying rightly, between China and the US is the capitalists own the state. In China, the state has the people are supposed to own the state, not the capitalists. The capitalists don't have a political party in China. So that's the main difference there. And so all this talk about, I think a lot of times when people don't understand what imperialism is, right, they'll be like, well, it's not the US, it's transnational companies. And I'm like, well, actually, it's because the US is imperial that it has these transnational companies. That's the entire point of expansion of power, military, and economy. It all has to tie in together because it is a completely and utterly unfair system. So, of course, the only way to implement it is to bring in your gunboat diplomacy. You bring in your guns to make sure that people agree in quotation marks and not really agreeing to your ridiculous extractive term.
Yeah, but I'm being very Marxist and materialist here. I'm saying, look at the history, how this was formed. Indian, look at the history. Look even to the label of it, British East India Company. It's the idea of a company, of a company hijacking the common good. The
colonialism is
notion.
I mean, that is colonialism, right? So we have to we're defining within those terms. But so let me just play this, because this is precisely what you're saying. This just shows the behind, how the sausage is being made, basically, how these people benefit from a system that is so despicable. Is basically what this is. The music is ridiculous. Tony has turned funny. I don't know what Tony is doing.
I hear gigantic numbers.
Gigantic numbers.
I think we need to put the sound.
Yeah, Tony's not making 30 million.
Down, just a little bit quieter.
This music on this is ridiculous. Al Jazeera, please fix your music on your TikToks. So basically, he's just I don't think you can even hear the voice, but this is Jeffrey Epstein's voice, which is horrible already, but here you go.
I don't know what Tony's doing for money. I hear gigantic numbers given to Tony. 5 million here, 10 million here, 5 million there. Tony's not making $30 million a year.
Tony Blair, for example, is doing probably 11 million per year from the Kazakhstan government.
He's making 10 million a year.
Yeah, but probably he gets the money and he leaves some of it with the others.
Let's start. I don't know if the money that Tony is getting is actually to Tony or somebody else.
Oh yeah, rubbish.
Yeah, so he's denying it, of course, but
Ileana, you probably will agree with me on this. We are talking about Sir Tony Blair, Sir Keir Starmer, Lord Mandelson. These are people knighted by the royals, one of the greatest human traffickers of all times. You dare to say this in Britain. You dare to say in Britain that you are in favor of a republic and against the monarchy. They will cut your head. They cut my head on that in the public service. It was Privilege Day, and I said, I'm going to work in the Privilege Day because I don't believe in privileges and I don't believe in monarchy. So I'm happy to work on Privilege Day. I don't want it as a, and that didn't sit well with the management. Yeah, so that's free speech in England. So we know now by the Epstein files that Andrew made Buckingham Palace available for a threesome with him and Epstein and the Russian young lady. He used the Queen's private airfield. Epstein and Ghislaine was freely circulated in the royal lodges of Windsor and Balmoral. You're going to tell me that nobody in the royal family, and this was after after 2008 when he was convicted by trafficking young women, minors. After his conviction, he was freely circulating within the royal premises, including Buckingham Palace. He was exchanging emails with Sarah Ferguson that in one of in her emails said, "Marry me, Jeffrey Epstein."
yeah.
Andrew was sending pictures of his two daughters on holiday, Beatrice and Eugene, to Epstein. And Epstein sends back an email to Sarah Ferguson Sarah Ferguson was indicating that he met her daughters, Beatrice and Eugene. So, and thank you for being so complimentary about me in front of my daughters. And you're going to tell me that royal family did not know who Epstein was? You're going to tell me that it was always secret and then Andrew was lying? Are people going to buy this? The royal family was in full knowledge of who Epstein was. They should have been. They have advisors. They have the best advisors in the world. And I don't think a rat can cross Buckingham Palace without being reported.
I mean, I guess my question here is like, the way that they dump these files, like 3 million of them, which is just too much for anyone to really go through, obviously, right? It's a way to flood the zone, right? Like, so basically we're having like a million different headlines, like Peter Tia, Prince Andrew, Fergus, like it's just all over the place. And there's no accountability, but there's no consequences to it. Like there are crimes that are being documented in these files, right? But no one is being like it's the DOJ with Department of Justice that has released it. So nobody is facing any charges or anything. Like what would be the normal procedure? As someone with a legal background, what would be the normal procedure if you had a trove of evidence against people?
Yeah, so I think we need to separate here the public side of it and the legal side of it. The legal side of it is always slower. And the legal side of it will be that the judge or the judges and the prosecution should be getting the full files with no redactions under court confidentiality. Yeah, and the way it works, and it's not rocket science to go through 6 million documents when you have the tools. How does that go? You have platforms that those things are downloaded, and you go by search terms. You run by search terms, you put up teams. This is the regular disclosure, the day-to-day work of lawyers in legal firms in the US. and the UK, you have millions and millions of documents. You have a team under a confidentiality agreement that will go through it through technology, through the use of technology. You have loads of platforms that will help you to classify, qualify, and review. We call it document review before the disclosure. So the court should have full disclosure of everything and have a team engaged in. And I think the files, what is important is the file, it shows the impunity of them, why they were never investigated. We have 25 years back, people saying to the FBI they were eating human flesh, they were killing people. There were one of the allegations against Trump is that in his golf club, he was hosting prostitutes with Epstein, and some of them went missing. And there were rumors circulating that these women were buried in the golf fields from Trump. We don't take this as face value as evidence legally. We take this as indication in need of investigation. We haven't seen those investigations. Why was the FBI sitting in those files? Why was the FBI not investigating those claims? Because now they can say, well, it's uncorroborated, because this is the line now. It's uncorroborated evidence. Why didn't you go and try to refute or confirm? You had 25 years in your hands to refute or confirm. Why are you sitting in this? Why they were being protected? I think this is the biggest question that arises here. We know that Alexander Acosta, who was the family minister of Trump, helped Epstein to get away with incrimination. You know, so now it's very convenient that Epstein had to die. I'm not saying, I mean, there is a lot of indications that show that what happened, he was inconsistent with suicide. We have a lot of indications in the other direction. Why is this not being properly investigated? You know, it shows how the justice system in the US was sitting on this, was not investigated. And now they say, well, it's all there, but these are rumors, this is uncorroborated evidence. Hello, you had decades to investigate. You should have subpoenaed so many things. You should have gone to the golf club from Trump, and you should have excavated every inch like you generally do. That's how they do in the US. You know, they have all the tools to bring these people into accountability. And in the case of the UK, is Prince Andrew just being stripped of his title? He should be in jail. He should be under investigation by the Metropolitan Police. Peter Mandelson should be investigated by the Metropolitan Police seriously, urgently. This is a guy that commits treason again and again, and we're going to get in this.
Yeah, it's so disgusting.
And then you have the public right to know. You know, that's a different sphere. The public right to know. Then there you need to protect the victims. But what we're seeing here is that they withhold instead of discussing with the victims what should be released or not. I haven't seen victims be included in this disclosure process to say, what can we disclose, what names we cannot disclose, how we protect you from the disclosure. This is in a way a public pressure. And you ask me, why did Trump sign the Epstein Transparency Act? Because he had no other way out. If he would try, he could not veto it juridically because you have almost unanimity in both houses. So Trump could not efficiently veto because his veto will be thrown away by the Congress. He had no other option. He had no other option politically to go against it. It would be very detrimental for him. So now he's spinning one of his lies. Trump had no other option already legally, and politically less so. So this shows as well that, and I heard, I think it was Richard Wolff saying, why the Epstein, there is a level of Epstein files that causes so much hate, consternation within the American society, because American society cannot formulate anything that goes into a vocabulary which is against capitalism. So they cannot talk about inequality. But the Epstein files shows the highest level of inequality economically, of power, of standing above the justice system. This is expression. They cannot put into words and say, this is such an unequal country. Look how we concentrate power. Look how we are imperialist. Look how we colonize the world minds. They can't, but in a way, it's a revolt of seeing how these people got away with it, got away with the most depraved acts you can possibly think of in their own land. I think there's also this element, because if happens in Libya, if this happens in Sudan, if women are being raped in Sudan, if child are being abused in Palestine, that would not be a commotion for them, right? But this is in their own sacred land that was being stood as the biggest model of democracy for centuries. It hurts the ego as well.
But I have a feeling that instead of allowing for the collapse of their perception of moral authority, they're going to just put it on a small group of people, versus a wider system.
Yeah.
I think that's probably already what's happening. And I mean, let's go get into the Israel stuff, because I think one of the key things that they're trying really hard in the media space is to obscure just how ingrained Zionism is in the U.S. empire, U.S. imperialist system. But let's talk about that, because obviously Mendelssohn, Zionists, I mean, they're basically, if you're a Zionist, you're gonna be in one of these files.
Should we play George Galloway on that to begin with?
Okay, sure.
Yeah. Okay, let's play George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows, in case you don't know it. Ileana, you have been in his show, haven't you?
I was on his show. My first ever being interviewed was on.
Maybe we should bring him or Gayatri, his wife, to our show. Let's see what he has to say.
Yeah,
people are going to the FBI 25 years ago and testifying to the FBI with polygraphs and the rest that Donald Trump, the president of the United States, was raping young girls and smacking them across the face because one of them protested that he hadn't worn protection. He slapped her on the face and said, "You'll have to get an abortion," and he threw money at her for the abortion. This is the man on whom they lay hands. These evangelical maniacs think he's the son of Christ. Well, he is actually the son of Christ. His father was called Christ, but that's the place we're in. Bill Gates, that we were told for 25 years was a paragon of humanity. We were treated to his views on every subject under the sun, is revealed to be discussing with Epstein how he can get antibiotics to sprinkle in his wife's martini because he has contracted a sexually transmitted disease from a Russian prostitute and had presumably therefore passed it on to his wife. Gates, Diamond, all these magnates, plutocrats, they were all revolving around Jeffrey Epstein. And I hope it's not anti-Semitic to make this point. Is it anti-Semitic to point out the gigantically disproportionate number of Jews and Israelis and dual Israeli nationals in this farrago of filth that is revealed in these files? People are...
Ileana, your take on that.
I mean, that's just so disgusting. I was, as he was talking about that, I'm like, is this finally the end of Bill Gates? I mean, obviously not, because, you know, Bill Gates is a billionaire with a lot of things that we actually, I think the general public don't know, the extent of his power actually, and his soft power, and NGOs all over the world, etc., the Bill Gates Foundation. So, you know, it's not the end, but definitely, absolutely, I think I think in terms of this like veneer of civility, I think that's gone. What do you think?
Hopefully, I think this should be gone. It should be gone. There's no other way. And you know, Ileana, I think UK is very great in being very civil. You know, in the UK, there's a mask that it's now crumbling. And, you know, with the royals, and we have to talk to the UK audience, Lord Peter Mandelson. Peter Mandelson is a British Labour fixer type of guy. He was the architect of New Labour. What is New Labour? Well, New Labour is it's a project to destroy the left from within, and who, of course, he was a senior minister to Tony Blair and to Gordon Brown. He was a EU trade commissioner, so very important roles. And Keir Starmer, the now Prime Minister of the UK, he was nothing else but the UK ambassador to the US. It's a role traditionally given to lobbyists, you know, traditionally.
Well,
and
we welcome to
I think you
Empire Watch Weekly.
Yeah. So it's really insane. So Galloway had an interview with Mark
Thank you for
Seddon,
joining us, Paul.
where he's saying, look, Lord Mandelson, he used to sell the Morning Star, which is a left-wing newspaper, in front of the Tube. And then he was invited to the Labour Party by a guy, Kinnock. And Kinnock...
Wait, can we just stop there? Because Morning Star Online, Morning Star is a friend of the show. We have interviewed so many people.
No. So he was someone who was selling Morning Star. So he was acting as progressive.
To go from one of the only, really not the only, but English speaking socialist newspapers in the UK, to go from that to whatever this is like imperialism times the worst, you know, this is the nth of imperialism, the highest stage of imperialism, not even, you know.
This goes to show his level of opportunism, you know, and how he's capable of defrauding idealism. So he became a project of Kinnock. Kinnock had a project to destroy the Labour Party project of Tony Benn, who was a true socialist. And he wanted to change the Labour Party into what George Galloway called the Clinton-X Club, that would do imperialist abroad and neoliberal policies at home, would include Israel in their agenda, Zionism, and all other symptoms of late 20th century, early 21st century so-called social democracy. And Mandelson was brutally effective in all of this, you know. And Mark says there are just 3 Labour leaders that saw through him, was John Smith, Ed Miliband, and Corbyn. And Mandelson came here crashing unions, ensuring them and the membership in Labour had no real say, and doing from within, dismantling the whole socialist movement. And now you're telling me, so Mandelson has been throughout Labour and has survived various scandals. So who was covering up for him? And then Keir Starmer says, I did not know he had relationships to Epstein. He lied. Keir Starmer went on Parliament saying that Mandelson lied about being involved with Epstein. Let me pause here for a moment. That gives me chills, because why would you vet someone explicitly on Epstein files if you don't have a suspicion of it? You know, because they knew he was part. So a way to go to circumvent the vetting is, okay, everybody, we know that you're part, we know that you had relationship and businesses with Palantir and businesses with Epstein. So let's just do a vetting where you declare having nothing, so then we can pull you into the government. So this is an admission that Starmer knew. And Starmer definitely cannot say, I knew nothing about Mandelson. I did not know who Mandelson was. He was a newcomer. I had to seek for an advisor who gave me wrong advice. No, Stammer knows Mendelssohn for a very, very long time. And Mendelssohn went public to say, he admittedly went public to say, I will do everything to daily sabotage Corbyn. He said this in the Jewish Chronic event. I don't know if you had the link, and he's saying this, and he and Keir Starmer were conspiring. Do you remember the Labour files when they came out? Jeremy Corbyn was removed from the Labour Party by alleged anti-Semitism, which was a completely artificially fabricated claim. Who was behind the claim? Mendelssohn, Keir Starmer. They were co-conspirators. They are partners in crime, and the Labour files showed exactly the opposite. There were no problems. So the leaked internal Labour information concluded there was no evidence being found that anti-Semitic complaints were treated any different than other forms of complaint, and that Corbyn teams did not have a lack of robust process. They had process, they had system, training, education, and effective line management. So this was a hostile attack on Corbyn. And, and the one who was bringing the socialist ideas back to the Labour Party. And Mendelssohn openly urged Starmer in 2021 to continue to purge left-wing MPs using anti-Semitic allegations. Mendelssohn is a Zionist of the highest order,
Yeah, and how that sort of results tangibly. Gosh, so annoying. There's an echo, I think. I don't know. But yeah, how that results tangibly when we're talking about, like, obviously the continual direct participation in the genocide in Palestine. Obviously, the UK is a direct active participant in that. But also, as we've talked about, Palestine being this laboratory for the most depraved of our technologies, Palantir is like one of those projects. And Palantir has associations with Mendelssohn. Obviously, he lobbied for Palantir to be used in conjunction with our National Health Services. This is to do with Mendelssohn's lobbying initiatives, right, for Palantir. So again, it's like if someone is like, oh, I hate Corbyn anyway, which could be a lot of people right now, but just say you're thinking that, like, if you're someone right wing, say, do you really want Palantir to be involved in collecting data in our health services? Like, do you think that's, if you don't care about the genocide, right? Like, is this not something that is also cause for alarm if you were from the right wing? This is like the result of being a Zionist. It's like, obviously for us, we are against the genocide, but if you really didn't care about the genocide, you also have to think about just all these other things
of Palantir and having your hands in personal medical data, which they have now. As you pointed out, Ileana, you brought here a very hard evidence about Keir Starmer relation with Palantir connection. So in February last year, Keir Starmer and then U.S. Ambassador Peter Mandelson, Epstein files, they went with a cabinet officer, what they call an informal visit, to Washington headquarters. And what they say, they've met the Palantir CEO, Alice Karp. That's the report of Times of Israel. And it's not registered as an official visit. And what happens is that now later Palantir received from the British government a contract of $240 million deal. It's an award. There was no competitive tender. Palantir didn't even went to a tender and has been awarded this huge government contract, which is collecting, part of it is with the NHS, which is this British public system where they collect patient information, Palantir. So we have here, I don't know, it can't get any worse, isn't it?
I mean, it can get worse in that the more you use the files, the worse it gets. But I think this is like, these are tangible things that affect all of us. Even if you're like, okay, who cares about what these disgusting people do behind closed doors? Like, even if you had, I mean, I think there's just nothing.
We're being ruled by this class, Ileana.
Yes,
That's the bottom line. We are being
exactly.
ruled by those thugs. We are being ruled and hijacked our democracy or prospects of democracy and rights and all the struggles, historical struggles for equality. We are being ruled by people like Lord Mandelson, Sir Keir Starmer, who are promiscuous, doing business with people ripping up our data, our rights, our dignity, killing people, torturing people, and doing what they did with women just at home. Imagine outside of the home.
It's just absolutely appalling and disgusting. And like you're saying too, I mean, I think, did you already mention this, that it's not just the NHS, the MOD, the Ministry of Defense Operations.
Oh yeah, Palantir received a Oh God, Palantir received a 670 million UK in contracts and 250 deal with the MOD, the Ministry of Defense in the UK. And not to talk about the revolving door, you know, where ministers, the former personnel of the Ministry of Defense go directly to those firms, were hired by Palantir.
Yeah. And then, of course, did you know, again, I think this part is really important. The 1.5 billion investment partnership announced in September 2025 to establish a European defense headquarters in London, expected to create 350 jobs and support AI-driven military operations. I mean, this is absolutely. This is the same exact playbook that Europe is using, you know, with Rutte being the head of NATO, the chair of NATO. Is that his position? But basically, like, this idea of like, we are under attack, and it's like, you're not. I mean, we have to defend ourselves from Russia, and it's like the only reason that you have any enemies is because you're part of the U.S. empire. Like, that's the enemies that you are making are just because you're a part of an imperialist system that is determined to harm every country that wants to be sovereign, you know? So, but the fact that we are investing so heavily in military operations, in the military sector, and really, where are we investing in terms of productive economy? We're really not.
And you know what? I wonder in the UK budget how these numbers are being twisted and turned. Probably the 240 is saying goes to health. It doesn't say it goes to Palantir. You know, they are probably saying that 250 doesn't go defense, go in technology advancement. That's how the Keir Starmer government is making up, like what they did with the 11 billions account to the environment that we reported here. Keir Starmer said he put 11 billion on environment, which was a lie. He was just relabeling things, and it went far shorter. It was 78 shorter than his promise. So we know how that works. And well, by the way, Open Democracy had an investigation and reported Mandelson, while in cabinet, he took part in a brief called involving supporters and Western politicians with the IDF, the Occupation Forces of Israel spokesperson. Yeah. And so it's also it shows clearly his alignment. And Declassified UK now in September 2025 report leaked material where Mandelson asked Jeffrey Epstein for help vetting in an Israeli consultant, and that Epstein forwarded it to Ehud Barak. So the Declassified UK, before this files was released, was already pointing out the links between Epstein and Mandelson. Nobody cared. Nothing happened because Declassified UK is an independent journalism. Nobody reported. I mean, if UK, you had a free press, you would have the Telegraph, the Independent, everybody saying, look, they are showing hard proof here, leaked material where Mandelson and Jack Epstein are talking to each other and vetting an Israeli consultant and forwarded to Ehud Barak. Why is the British media suppressing news? They are news suppressor. And you know what? I was looking at the Independent and their disgusting report about Epstein. Sir, Dame, the Princess Eugene, and that they don't call Epstein any time as a criminal, as a pedophile, as a rapist. They call the financier, the financier, the financier, and they avoid in the same sentence to put Andrew with Epstein. This is a neural, this is all very it's not by chance that they don't want to they don't want you to have a subconscious association within Epstein and the royal family, but they have to report somehow. So they use euphemisms and never use the name Epstein in the same sentence as they use with the Sir, Dame, Sarah Ferguson, with Andrew Mountbatten, Commoner Andrew Mountbatten, and Princess Eugene. It's absolutely disgusting, the language and the dishonesty. And they use, of course, they use a LGBT person that looks very young, very fresh, to give you the appearances of the independence of this news, that this news is subversive, when in reality, they are just trying to make it easier to the royal family.
I mean, instead, what they're doing here, I think this is kind of an interesting sort of insight into how propaganda is done. Like you see here, Poland's PM Tusk, 3 days ago, it's reported that Poland will be probing, so launching an official investigation, launching an investigation into possible links between Jeffrey Epstein and Russian intelligence. It's just like what you're saying, right? Like, this is absolutely ridiculous, first of all, because there's even reports that Epstein tried to meet with Putin multiple times and was rebuffed. But we have so much evidence already in the files of people that are involved in all this. And why would Poland, obviously Poland is this absolutely most obsequious of US
fascist state, yeah.
Yeah, but like the idea that they're doing this seriously, reporting it, like you said, putting Epstein and Russia in the same.
Of course, they need to do that. They need to do that.
And then this type of reporting 3 days ago. Now, if you type in Epstein, you're going to see loads and loads of headlines that just say like, could Epstein have been a Russian spy? It's from this place that there's no evidence.
Nothing.
And then they're like running with it. That's what propaganda does. And it's all really to obscure Israel's involvement in this, Mossad's involvement in this, and the UK and the US involvement in this.
Exactly.
Obviously,
shall we move to our interview with Paul? And can you excuse me for 2 minutes while we're playing it up?
Sorry, what were you saying?
Can you excuse me for 2 minutes while you're playing this?
You know what? I'm gonna play something else because I want you to watch the Batul.
Oh, right. Okay, it's just so hot in here, and I have the wrong clothes. I want to just.
Oh well, okay. So
let's play this first, and then I'll change clothes. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So basically, just to set up again who Paul is, and I'm gonna have to just to set up who Paul is. Do you want to say, you actually explain it in the interview, but I'm just going to say his bio again?
No, I think you should say the bio because I didn't say it in a very complete way.
But you did in the interview, showed when you met him and stuff. But So our special guest, Paul Larudee, is an Iranian-born American activist and linguist. He is a co-founder of the Free Gaza Movement and the Free Palestine Movement, active in the international solidarity movement supporting Palestine. He was also an organizer and participant on the first and only flotilla in 2008 to successfully break Israel's naval siege of Gaza. So he's also, as we said, he's Iranian-born. He has been involved in these spaces for a really long time, as you can see, like 2008. So we interviewed him. We talked about a lot of different aspects of what's happening in Israel, what's happening in the US in relation to the perception of Palestine and Iran. And also I did get into an argument with him, but I wanted to.
It's not an argument, it's a discussion.
It's a discussion. Yeah, it's a discussion that does tend to come up a lot on this show, partly because it is just something that's sort of top of mind of people, you know, like we are trying to figure out the way in which to dismantle these imperialist things like the colonial project of Israel. And my view is an anti-imperialist view from like the Cold War and sort of looking at a US imperialist system and then the global South countries, like very much if you read the dossier Hyper-Imperialism by Tricontinental, that's kind of where my angle is from. Paul obviously has a different background to that. So it's a conversation that we had that didn't get heated. It was not in a terrible way or anything. It was just like difference in opinion.
I think it's
a
necessary discussion. It's because we are, as we discuss, we are seeing the sophistication and complexity of the imperial tools. And this is a very relevant thing for us to talk about.
Yeah, so basically I did have this interview that is out right now with Batul Sabiti, a Lebanese British political commentator. And we did talk about a lot of what's happening in Iran and the axis of resistance and the regional actors and their power dynamics. So I'm going to put this in the chat, but there's a specific clip that I did clip out, and I'm going to show you the vid cover here because this is the argument against what Paul was saying that I did not articulate very well, but I wanted to just show it. So this is basically from this, if you watch this clip on our channel, Batul talks about how Israel exists on US oxygen. So it's a slightly different viewpoint like that, as opposed to Israel controlling the US. Batul's view is that Israel cannot exist without US. It's very dependent on the US, and it's basically kind of not very successfully actually implementing US agenda in the region. And I think that goes in line with the idea that the US is actually declining in a significant way. And so their agendas are not actually being fully fleshed. They're not really that successful across the board. But that's like the difference there. So I'm just going to put this link in the chat so anyone could watch it. Like that's the interview. We can just go to Global Majority for Peace playlist and watch that. But I wanted to show these two little snippets.
When the war ends without the ability to eliminate Iran and the Axis, I believe that will mark the beginning of the Israeli occupation entity's downward trajectory because it's not fulfilling its functional role of being able to subdue these very movements. And then if you also consider the global support for Israel completely weakening, the West may come to see it as easier and better to deal with a real power through which it can secure as many of its interests as possible, rather than maintaining an explosive and unstable situation in such an important region that's threatening all its interests. So even if we look at the size of the protests in the West and the reversal of public opinion, which I believe it's literally unprecedented. The reversal of public opinion with regards to Gaza is like unlike anything I've ever seen. And that's very evident upon the new generation who have taken a position different to the older generation. And so when the general situation does not tolerate Israel, that no longer serves the Western Empire's interests.
And we'll move on to Paul Larudee. And then
America needs Israel to act as that base. What are the other bases that America has in the region? For example, it has the Al Udeid base in Qatar, but it's not, you cannot compare having a base in a country that has its inherent components of survival. Like these countries are countries in and of themselves, made up of people that are native to that country, that belong to that country, have their set of beliefs, cultures, etc. Whereas Israel is a state that was created and founded on the basis of serving that interest. Once America no longer needs that disciplinary stick, once you remove that need, then Zionism in and of itself has no value. Like this is an important point, is that when we talk about power projection and about Zionism having this inherent power, it only has this power because America, the West, gives it that power because they need it.
On that.
Sorry.
First of all, so help us God.
I know. I hope that she's
and second of all, I think it's a valid point, although a bit optimistic, I guess. I think when people are discussing, does the US control Israel or Israel controls the US, I think you are analyzing the situation by the symptoms. So I think it's a very scratching the surface kind of proposal. I think there's lots of types of associations people can have. And I think here my personal opinion is that we are talking a symbiotic relationship, a relationship that it's exchange who controls. They have common goals, but they might differ in methods, they might differ in timing, they might differ in agenda. Each of their own have a level of independency, because otherwise we would remove the responsibility from the US and remove responsibility for Israel. They're both co-conspirators.
Yeah, I don't think you can.
And I think, hold on. And I think when Paul says Israel controls the US Congress is very different from John Meyer saying this, because he puts into a different context. And I think we are talking about here on a symbiotic relationship. You can't see one without another. You can't de-entangle and say the dog is the tail of the dog. It's a very complex situation. And I think raise crowns and they will eat your eyes. The Frankenstein, there are moments the Frankenstein is acting on its own. And there are moments, and we know without US funding, Israel is crushed. Israel only exists through the West money.
Exactly.
I don't think they reach the level where they are an independent country, an autonomous country. This is their own delusional self-projection of power. Yes. They need US support to exist, but they all operate by their own. They all go back to bite America. They all go to hijack parliaments worldwide. They do have a huge responsibility and creating a new paradigm of the empire for the empire. So we cannot.
I guess that's where we disagree. We disagree there, because even though I agree that individuals in there have self-interest and they obviously have pretensions and aspirations for greater power and expansion, especially someone like Netanyahu, I think the powers, and I think what Batul is trying to say is that ultimately the bigger power is still the US. Now, whether it can move to Israel at a certain point, it just hasn't so far. I mean, Israel is a complete and utter creation of imperialism, Western imperialism.
With its own life. It's a creation that...
Not really. I mean, her argument is against you. That's the point. Her argument is against you, and the hyper-imperialism dossier is against. So there are two different perceptions of this. I think that's the main thing, and that's why it is a disagreement between Batul and Paul. That's why I wanted to show her side of it before we go into her.
But I think when she says Israel has no power without US, probably not. And if Iran comes in, Israel is out of the picture. But we cannot unharm Israel. For instance, I'll give you an evidence that how is Israel doing its own thing. Netanyahu, I was talking to a political scientist, and she was saying Netanyahu is now trying to be as perverted as he can, as violent as he can, because he wants to create a division internally in Palestine concerning Hamas. They want that the Palestine people become furious of Hamas because they are playing a very, very saying like, Hamas, what did you do? What did you do? Now we are paying the price of it. So there is I think when you say that Israel is solely a tool of the US empire, you are easing for Israel. You are removing their responsibility.
No, because
we need to say this as a symbiotic movement, and symbiotic movement each have their life on their own within that codependency.
That's not the argument. The argument is not to minimize what Israel does, but the argument is to just position where the power is, and the power dynamic is with the US. At least that's what if the US wanted to cut off Israel.
Oh yeah, it's gone.
No matter
it's
what.
Gone.
So that's where the thing is. And so this argument that Israel...
But then I ask you, can the West cut the power of Israel when we see in the Epstein files how Israel has hijacked the entire elite? You know, that's the thing.
Well, we had a revolution, right?
Stage that is very difficult to cut power of Israel. Israel has hijacked in a way the US elite. That's what I'm saying.
No. I'm sorry. That's where you're misunderstanding here, because it's imperialism that allows that system. If we actually did have a revolution in the US, like say in a really made up imagination.
How likely is this?
I know, but I'm just saying, like, if we did have a revolution in the US and they cut off these arms,
the US is already so entangled. The EU is already so entangled that they no longer have the autonomy to cut Israel if Israel doesn't serve their purposes. That's my point. She says if Israel no longer serves the purpose, they'll cut Israel. I'm not sure. They got so entangled. This is so much their project that there is a feeding dynamic. I don't think they could cut Israel that easily. I think this is a very optimistic statement. It's too entangled to be cut. It's a symbiotic dynamic. If I cut Israel, I may drown with Israel.
Yes,
and
but
that's where her argument is incomplete.
Well, this is only 1 minute of it, but the fact of the matter is that you are right that they are drowning. That is the more.
And they can't cut Israel. It becomes a limb. It will drown them.
If they did cut Israel, but the thing is, Israel is their arm. No, my point is, Israel is their arm, and therefore, they cut it, they will sustain injuries. So whether or not they want to do that to themselves, as their power is waning across the world stage, but the fact of the matter is still that the power resides with the U.S. Like whether or not the U.S. can do anything within. That's not the question, though. Like, the question is, where does the power reside? And also this idea that Israel... Of course it's not simple, but none of these...
It's a symbiotic relationship. If the US wants to cut Israel now because they no longer serve, because they are becoming too vile, because Netanyahu is going mental, because they are having frictions in their power struggles, they can't. They are too entangled. Sometimes they are, that reinforces your argument, one and the same.
Yes, but that is
one hijacking the other, one owning the other.
Not hijacking, they're together. They're together.
Yeah, but they are not together in peace. They are together in coercion. They are together in violence. They are together.
There's a lot of different ways in which they're together. But the fact remains, U.S. agenda in that region is still being served by Israel. Like it is still, because the U.S. imperialism's entire strategy and goal was not even a strategy. It's just the goal is to continue their hegemony, or it's not maybe a false hegemony, but they're trying to exert more power, expand more power. If Israel really did go up against, that's not even possible to think about, like you're saying, because they are so, that is their arm in that region. So it's not like
they can't. 99% of the congressmen in the US are with Zionist money, and we are going towards this in the UK as well.
But that is
such
still
a complex game. I think it's
not a game, but I think that just the idea that they're controlling it is just, I think, is the wrong. I just disagree with it, because I still think the power is there. It's like there's many components to this power, but it's an entire system of imperialism.
It's one with pulling another. It's like, I think it's a dialectic.
Imperial system is that way.
It's not cause and effect. It's dialectical.
The entire imperial system works that way. You think anybody in the imperialist system is in there doing good? Nobody's doing good. Every single one of them are selfish pieces of shit, right? Like none of them care about humanity. Like that's why they're in position. They like literally don't think anything's wrong with genocide or dismantling a
Epstein Club is a perfect allegory of this relationship.
Yeah, it just really lays bare.
At the same time, it's an allegory. It's the material proof of those very, very rotten, dysfunctional relations.
It absolutely
of codependency, of co-conspiracy, symbiotical, and dialectical. So horrifying. I wish it was cause and effect, because it's just so much easier to stop it. I think external things will stop it. I don't think maybe internally.
It's cause and effect, but it's cause and effect from imperialism to the effect of imperialism. That's why we're anti-imperialists. And that's why we believe in a multilateral world, because that is the oppositional to imperialism. So there is a cause and like to say that there's no cause and effect means that there's absolutely no way out of it. But as imperialism declines, and a multilateral world
within this relationship, I'm not saying
they all have to decline, all of them. Not, it's like you can't just defeat Zionism alone. No, because Zionism is an integral part of imperialism.
Absolutely. I disagree with that. Let's go to Paul, because we are here having this beautiful conversation. For me, it's beautiful.
But it's the same.
But we need to bring Paul in.
That we're having with Paul. But yes, let's just go for it. Here
Can you excuse me for 5 minutes? I really need to take this off.
Welcome to Empire Watch Weekly Live. Thank you for joining us, Paul.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Paul. Just for the disclosure of people watching, I had the honor to meet Paul Larudee, who is someone extremely committed to the Palestinian cause. And right at the beginning, I think Ileana, you're going to read his bio. I met Paul in our attempt to go to Rafah, accompany a convoy of journalists to take humanitarian aid to Gaza. And Paul and I, we got detained by Sisi's military regime for 1 day. And that's how our friendship began. Quite eccentric, isn't it, Paul? Not every day you get arrested in Egypt.
It's an interesting way to get to know somebody.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for braving everything and coming back again for us. So we're having you on to talk about many different things, but to begin with, after weeks of military buildup in the region, U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi will meet in Istanbul on Friday. So this is today. When we're airing it. And I just want to quote from this article that I found from Dorn.com that just says, Iranian sources told Reuters last week that Trump, are you going to put that up? Sorry. Thank you, Sarah. That Trump had demanded 3 conditions for resumption of talks: 0 enrichment of uranium in Iran, limits on Tehran's ballistic missile program, and ending its support for regional proxies. So that's a lot of demands to resume talks. Can you start by breaking down what you believe the strategy is behind US's current escalations and what they will be expecting to achieve with this talk? I would just say with a sort of pretext that many people, more sane people, don't necessarily believe in the US's ability to enter into talks in good faith.
I think that's generally the assumption. And furthermore, the demands are unrealistic. And they're understood to be unrealistic even by the United States and the representatives who are going to be at the talks. In fact, the Iranians have said that they're going for the purpose of discussing the question of uranium enrichment. That's it. They have not said that they are going to discuss either of the other issues. And I think that's exactly where they're going to stay. They're going to say, I mean, from the Iranian point of view, I haven't heard it voiced in this manner, but they would probably counter to the Americans well, if we reduce our missile program, will you reduce your missile program? And if we reduce our enrichment of uranium to zero, will you reduce your uranium enrichment? Will you stop supporting proxies in the Middle East, such as Al-Qaeda and the Kurds in Syria and Iraq and so forth? I mean, the Kurds there are U.S. proxies everywhere. So it's I don't know if they'll use that argument, but the point is that I think they're going to stand firm on everything except reduction and not to zero of uranium enrichment. That's my guess.
Oh, so I'm just going to take a little step back and make a very simple question, which is not less important. Can you explain to our audience why Iran is such a target for the US and for Israel? If Iran falls, how will the Middle East be reshaped? What is at stake here?
Well, the reason Iran is a target is essentially the same reason that Libya was a target, and Syria and Venezuela and so forth. Or Cuba. It's because they are not. They don't take orders from the United States. Now look at all the other nations you want to think of. And either they're of little interest to the United States because they're small and marginal and so forth, or they take orders from the United States. Look at Jordan, look at Egypt, look at Syria now after the overthrow. Look at all of Europe, pretty much. They all take orders from the United States. That is what is of interest to the United States. And furthermore, the United States takes orders from who? Israel. It takes orders from Israel. And Israel wants to destroy Iran. They want a compliant regime in Iran, or they want Iran destroyed, or they want it split up into areas, independent areas that are of no threat to Israel. So that's the sum total of the motivation behind the destruction of Iran. If Iran is destroyed, then to a large extent, the axis of resistance, of which Iran is kind of the hub, that is all of the organizations such as Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hashd al-Sha'bi, the popular mobilization units in Iraq, and other groups in Iraq, and in Yemen, the so-called Houthis, Ansar Allah in Yemen, and so forth. These it will break the back of the axis of resistance, but I don't see that happening.
You actually stepped into one of our biggest arguments on this channel, the idea of whether or not Israel controls the US, or is Israel part of the US empire. I recently just had an interview with Lebanese-British political commentator Batul Subaiti, and her stance is quite the opposite, that Israel is definitely a component of US agenda in the region. And if Iran fails to fall, Israel's strategic use for US empire may be untenable. So there's this idea, I suppose, amongst all of us, where we have slight disagreements with this, but I suppose whichever way you slice it, Iran is specifically significant within this moment, because if Iran falls, and that doesn't seem likely, it does change the game. And if it doesn't fall, it still changes what that region looks like. I think one of the things too, just to go back to this idea of the regional proxies in that area, or like Trump demanded that Iran end its support for regional proxies. Can you, you touched upon this a little bit as like Hezbollah, Hamas, where Iran might be offering some support in that region as part of the axis of resistance. But can you also maybe give your assessment of what you believe is the possibility of it ceasing to support and be a key component of the axis of resistance? Is there even any possibility of that happening?
Well, first of all, I would say that Iran might be willing to cease its support of all of its proxies in the region, because Iran would say that they have no proxies in the region, that the organizations with whom they work are essentially allied, but they don't follow instructions from Iran, and therefore they're not proxies of Iran. The organizations like Hezbollah and Ansarullah and the others that I mentioned, they're independent. They work with Iran. They get support from Iran, but they make up their own mind about what they want to do and you know what their own actions will be, whether they will work with Iran. Now they're very strongly supportive of Iran and vice versa. So if, for example, there's an attack on Iran by the United States and possibly Israel, then I think it's very likely that they will participate without any pushing from Iran. They do that because that's what they consider it very important.
But do you think that Iran would withdraw support or move out of that sort of alliance?
Absolutely not. The United States would not support the groups, the Contras in Nicaragua or any of its groups that they pay very high salaries to, which Iran doesn't do with its so-called proxies. But the United States would not do that, and Iran will not do that.
Well, just in the same subject, we had a recent article by Simon Rush. It's entitled, "What Comes Next on Iran?" So I'm going to quote David Barnea, the son to retire head of Mossad, Israel Lethal Foreign Operations and Counterterrorism Unit, made a little noted visit last month to Washington, accompanied by some military commanders. So what Hirsch argues is that overthrowing, we all know that overthrowing the religious leadership of Iran has been a long goal of Israel, many in America, many in Europe. But they know they need to persuade at least part of the Iranian military. They need a fracture there. So Hirsch speculates that this was the reason for Israel's recent mission in Washington. In your view, can this succeed?
In a word, no. And the evidence of that is in the war, the 12-day war last June, and also the attempted war in January of this year. In both of those cases, there were attacks from inside Iran through groups that were paid by the U.S. proxies, basically, including the MEK, the Mujahideen Khalq, and Kurdish forces and others that their job was to cause as much chaos as possible and to recruit and put fear into the leadership of the Islamic Republic. And it didn't work. It really didn't work because nobody defected and nobody was tempted to leave the leadership of Iran. So the possibility of that happening is essentially nil.
That's good news.
Yeah.
That's cheerful news. Yeah.
Well, we have a long way to go, I suppose. You helped, going back a little bit, a few decades here, you helped fund the Free Gaza Movement in the 2000s, leading to the first flotilla to break the siege and reach Gaza in 2008. 15 years later, October 7th marked for many an awakening to the reality of genocide in Palestine. How much has this welcome step forward affected the general U.S. public's understanding of how Israel fits into the wider U.S. imperial foreign policy? Do you find that there is less gullibility in terms of believing the manufacturing of consent around Iran, specifically about the recent protests that have been sort of framed as justification for U.S. intervention?
That's a complicated question, but with a lot of facets to it. But first of all, I had nothing to do with financing, but I was one of the organizers of the flotilla in 2008, and I and others sought financing from lots of others, and we got our financing through donations and so forth. But as far as the awareness of the U.S. public is concerned, certainly they have. The U.S. public has become much more aware. And a piece of evidence that points this out is that in the past, for just on the issue of how the U.S. public feels about Israel and the Palestinians, the U.S. has generally been extremely supportive of Israel until the present, and after October 7th of 2022, 2023. The public has for the first time in history, the polls have showed a higher degree of sympathy for the Palestinians than for Israel. That's a sea change. It's huge, and it certainly wasn't because of the mainstream media and the news that they were getting from these forces. It was almost entirely thanks to social media, which and of course the Zionist elements are trying to buy social media in order to suppress and censor these items. But it comes through because when you stop a leak somewhere, it comes out from somewhere else, and that's exactly what's happening. So the American public is more aware of the situation than it ever has been in the past. Mm-hmm. Now, this is not to say that it's like we have a free press here. It's heavily weighted. As much the Zionist cause is doing as much as it can to distort the news that Americans are getting, but to a significant extent, they're failing. So this is changing it. Furthermore, in the case of Trump and his supporters, the so-called MAGA supporters, Make America Great Again, they are very disappointed with him and his administration, because what they see is that that Trump is less interested in making America great again than it is of making Israel great again, and all the support for Israel. And so this is another trend that is working against Israel and against the policy that the Trump administration and other elements of the U.S. government are attempting to make happen.
But how is that translating to perhaps the U.S. public's awareness around Iran? And because, like most things, like exactly the same issue with Venezuela, right? This type of propaganda is decades in the making. It doesn't matter who is the head of state in the U.S. And so here we have, again, this justification, the numbers that they're reporting that supposedly the Iranian government is supposed to have killed is like as much as the entire genocide in Palestine in the past years. It seems quite a remarkable achievement if they can do that in like 2 weeks. So like, how much is that working on the public at the moment?
Well, for many years, I was involved in a major way with trying to present to the U.S. public what is actually happening on the ground in Syria. And what I discovered was that the picture of what's happening in Syria was completely distorted. Absolutely fake news. The media, the Western media, were broadcasting films that were total fabrications. Children with fake blood on the top of their head, always on the top of their head, because you couldn't see the wound because it was in the hair. You see, so and all sorts of fake media. I mean, I won't get into the details, but I proved it several times. In fact, one of the films that they used in a National Geographic report on Syria was taken from Gaza. It was they used that and said it was Aleppo instead of Gaza. But that's typical. That's only one instance of many, many like this. So distortion is the name of the American media, and that'll be the case. Now, the U.S. public is not sympathetic to Iran, and they probably will not be sympathetic to Iran. But even though Iran refuses to develop nuclear weapons, but in America, you can't tell that to the American public. And I remember in the case of Syria, talking to officials of the Syrian government, including the president, that I said, you need to get your story across to the American public. They need to know. They need to have something to counter it. And their attitude was, oh, forget it. We don't have the resources or the means to counter this disinformation campaign. So we'll just win on the ground and not in the media. So I can't fault them for that. That's a logical tactic. So I don't expect that to happen. But nevertheless, at the present time, I would have to say I don't expect war with Iran for a number of other reasons, which maybe you want to go into, but I'll leave it right there for now.
Yeah, we definitely want to go in. And actually, I was going to ask you, Trump failed in this attempted war now in the beginning of the year. We don't know if he has been fed with very optimistic information from the Israelis and his group of advisors in the United States. But it seems that he decided, after not achieving his goal, not to intervene. Why? Are we talking about internal or external hindrances? Both? What are the contingencies why Donald Trump stepped back?
Actually, it's both internal and external. And the internal forces that caused him to do that was, first of all, let's just take the January initiation of war, if you like, and that was that the forces that were working inside, the infiltrators, if you like, and the mercenaries that were placed in Iran fell flat on their faces, especially, for many reasons. And part of the reasons are that the Iranian public, although there are dissident groups in Iran, the vast majority of the Iranian public is very supportive of their government and their system of government. So it's not like you have some autocratic rulers that are forcing themselves upon the Iranian public. No, the government listens to its people, and the people listen to their government. So it's a totally unrealistic picture that Westerners have of what's going on there. They're the ones that overthrew the Shah, who was the tyrant, and that the form of government is the democracy. In a sense, can be found in every mosque in Iran, because that's where the government has its ears and listens to the people and their complaints and desires. So I've forgotten where we were with this.
So we talked about the internal and external reasons that made Trump back off from Iran. Yeah. Okay.
So internally, it was not about to break, but externally, as the war became more and more likely in the view of many of the observers, Iran finally came to the conclusion that trying to appease the United States was out of the question. This was not going to work, and they couldn't trust the United States. So the only thing they could do was to threaten or state their position such that they would cause so much damage, such as cutting off the Strait of Hormuz, destroying, in fact, quite possibly American bases and naval ships and so forth with their ship missiles and with their ballistic missiles and so on. And also to flatten Israel in a sense, because that's what they came close to doing last June. At that time, they were actually somewhat restrained because they hit only, as their policy is, they hit only military targets. But some of those military targets, like Unit 8200, the complex that combines intelligence with military operations, and it was hit, and nobody knew that Iran had the intelligence as to where it was. And where was it? It was in the middle of large groups of buildings that were residences. It was in the middle of a major residential area. And that got hit, and that sent that and the fact that the missiles got through to all the bases, and all of the defense that Israel used in terms of anti-missile defenses, mainly anti-missile missiles, surface-to-air missiles. Those failed because hypersonic missiles cannot be stopped, and so now, when the United States said that it was going to do all-out war against Iran, through a back channel, Israel spoke to Iran and said, because Iran said, we will destroy Israel, and they have the means to do that. And Iran and Israel knows that they have the means to do that.
That would be my next question, actually, my follow-up question. A war with Iran could be the end of the Zionism?
Well, Israel actually spoke to Iran and said, if the United States, of course, they knew whether the United States was going to hit Iran or not, but if the United States hits Iran, we will stay out of it. Israel will stay out of it. We will not touch Iran. And so please, don't hit us. We're not going to participate. And Iran said, oh, no, this is the entire war is on your behalf. And therefore, we are going to hit you just as hard whether you participate or not. And in fact, that is precisely the reason. Israel told.
Israel's only purpose in that region, if Israel cannot, if they cannot have the utility of keeping that region in check, quote unquote, like for the U.S. empire or U.S. imperialism. What use is Israel? If they're going to say that they're going to stand back, which is completely ridiculous considering all the actions that they've been doing for the past, I don't know how many decades, you know what I mean? Like, my math is not very good. It's completely, the other thing that strikes me is just, it reminds me of Netanyahu saying like, oh, we're going to be completely independent from the US in 10 years. And it's like, are you really investing? You're getting over like $3.6 billion per year from the US. You telling me that you are completely going to be independent from the US I think, like, just to, sorry, my big rant, but
is the US independent from Israel? I'm sorry, it's not Israel that is functioning on behalf of the US. It's the US that's functioning on behalf of Israel. All of the arguments about this overlook the fact that 99% of the members of Congress always vote for everything that they're told to vote for Israel, regardless of what their constituency says. They
don't respond to the constituency, though. So I guess the question
this is what I'm saying. The constituency
doesn't have power.
If you have 100% of the constituency that say, no, we want to stop all relations with Israel, and we insist that you vote that way, they will not do it, because in the next election cycle, that candidate, the incumbent candidate, will not even run. Why? Because the Israel lobby is so powerful. They have 1 or 2 representatives of the lobby for every member of Congress. They watch them carefully and meet with them at least every week to tell them what they have to do. And so it's completely under the control of the Israel lobby.
I think we're going to have to disagree here.
Let me give my opinion on this. I think, to be honest with you, I don't see a contradiction in both
There's a slight contradiction, but there's not a material, like the contradiction is not.
Okay, let me say, I don't see a contradiction in saying that Israel is a colonial project from the US and from the Europe, and saying that Israel also holds control over the US internal politics, I think it's a development. So they created a Frankenstein, and now they are in a very difficult dynamic. You know, it's more, of course they are part of the West Empire. Of course they serve the interests of the West Empire. And because they serve the interests, they hijacked the internal politics. I see it much more as a dynamic, a complex family dynamic of a very dysfunctional family that created its own monster, that now the monster comes and bites them regularly back. And they put so much money in the privatization of mass espionage, which is in Israel. And in Israel, they had such a great place to do this with no controls. Israel doesn't sign any chemical weapon agreements. Israel doesn't sign any nuclear agreements. And they have free, unfettered, immoral, unlawful, arbitrary powers to train this on Palestinians, which what an opportunity, because you can't do this in US territory. Well, we're trying to do this a little bit with ICE, but you're having pushback. So I would say I don't see a contradiction in both of your.
I think the only there is a contradiction.
A very nasty dynamic. There was
I'm
the
sorry, I have to respond to this, and that is that the United States does not need Israel. It has control of Jordan and Egypt and regimes throughout the world without transplanting Western population and Western movements like the Zionists in other places. They don't have to do that. They can control all of the Middle Eastern powers without Israel. And Israel is a huge drain on the economy. How many billions of dollars have we spent on Israel that we wouldn't have to spend? And are we getting money out of Israel? No, we're spending enormous amounts in Israel. And but we're taking money out of the other regimes in the region. So
you say it's part of the Zionist propaganda to say that the US depends on them to assert their power?
Yes, even Netanyahu said in a film that was widely circulated, he was speaking to Israeli citizens, and he said, "Oh, don't worry. The United States will go along this, and the United States is a place that's very easily moved, and it is if you control it well. And it's not just the Israel lobby. It's not just the Israel lobby. The Israel lobby is in an alliance with the military-industrial complex and financial markets, and they basically, as a group, control a great part of what actually runs the United States, the big corporations, the oligarchs, and the Israel lobby. But they're all of them are supportive of the Israel lobby. The Israel lobby is a huge part of it.
Epstein is showing this, right? Epstein
I mean, I think that's where we do have a disagreement in terms of as we're looking at the empire declining and the US absolutely belligerent in its insistence of trying to maintain a hegemony that it perhaps never really achieved in the first place. I think that there is there's a lot to say about the trajectory of when you have a colonial project and it has a life of its own, but then you also have an agenda to use that in the region, that I find it very hard to separate between US imperial agenda in the region and Israel. I think Israel is so much a part of one of their most powerful tools in the region. And it's not so simple right now in a world where I think there is a possibility of a multilateral world coming out. Not yet, but eventually with the rise of the global South, I don't think the US wants to give up any power in that region. So if they did take out Israel, if Israel's utility ceased to be for the US empire, that really does diminish US power in that region. Even if, like you say, they do have vassal states or they have a lot of slavish regional actors, but they don't have the complete control that they would like to have. I mean, like power like that, they're just like, they can't ever have enough power because they don't have true hegemony in the world. But that's that seems to be their only goal for US imperialism.
Sara, you asked why the United States did not change its mind about having this war with Iran. And my answer to that is because Israel said, please don't go to war with Iran. They'll destroy us. That's
yes, but if they did anyway. So yeah. I think the key is, this is such a long.
Israel think it is made rich majority is now 18 years old, and now he's telling that what to do. That can be compliant, but that also needs him in the business. It feels like a very disrupted family business.
I think it's very entangled right now. And I think
Julian, I think it's more a symptom to say if the tail wags the dog. We're talking about the symptom, but if we look at the dynamics, is do you know, like when therapists get a really fucked up family to work with, like this a total
or vice versa
family, yeah. So this is a total dysfunctional family, and then you have Epstein in the mix, showing how this family worked with corporations, with royal families worldwide. It's worse than we could possibly imagine. You cannot make this up. And my next question, if I may, is about ICE. So we know.
Well, before we go on to the next question, let me just say that I'm sympathetic to Ileana about that this relationship between Israel and the United States works in both directions. There's no question about that. But Israel has used the same method. They've developed a method through their Cyanim network. If you, I won't get into that, but and through, but they've done that with other governments. They've done it with the government of the UK and with France, and especially with Germany, but also even with India, which doesn't even have a major Jewish population.
With Brazil, the Workers' Party of Brazil.
But so is U.S. imperialism, and I think the key thing which I'm pushing back on is the minimizing of the accountability of U.S. empire here. I mean, I think the atrocities that the U.S. has perpetuated over the decades are just like unarguable. So to say that it is now all Israel's fault.
No, I didn't say it was all Israel's fault. All I'm saying.
I just don't think we can untangle them at the moment.
Exactly.
Yes, but that doesn't mean that Israel is controlling.
But to say that it's in the direction of the United States using Israel, we have to acknowledge that Israel is also using the United States.
Yes,
they say so.
Sure, but the U.S. definitely, I think, has a huge role in terms of U.S. imperialism across the entire world that is outsized compared to Israel. I'm not saying that Israel is not evil. It is absolutely shouldn't exist. I don't.
But they can't be separated. That is, when the United States is practicing its imperialism on the rest of the world, the influence of Israel is part of that imperialism.
But it's just part of U.S. empire. So like the insistence that it is Israel makes me think that people are giving the U.S. empire
I'm not saying it's just Israel. All I'm saying is that Israel has a kind of influence in the United States that no other country has.
Because it's part of the imperial structure of the United States.
Exactly.
That's what I'm saying. So you
It's
cannot blame.
inseparable. That's correct.
Yeah, it is inseparable, but you cannot take away, if you say that Israel controls the US, you're taking away the responsibility of the US. That's my only pushback on that.
No. I'm not taking away the responsibility of the
Then
US.
we agree, because I absolutely find it appalling to think that we would.
I don't think you guys disagree. I'm sitting here and I don't think you guys disagree. I think when you say
we did have a disagreement earlier, but it seems like we have reached a moment of agreement.
Well, I don't think it was a disagreement at all. I think it was much more about.
Now I disagree with you, Sarah. But to sort of like move on to Sarah's question,
So
so
we've seen through the Epstein files that it's an attempt, as Ileana was saying, to propagandize it. What is propaganda on the Epstein? To reduce it to a sex scandal. It's not a sex scandal because it was never consensual. We are talking about young women being trafficked, allegedly murdered, allegedly eaten, raped, systematic raped, trafficked.
we're going to get into a lot of this tomorrow.
So I'm saying they are trying to make this a scandal, but the files are showing it's everywhere, and Mossad is a key central element nobody's talking about. At least it's not giving the weight it should give. So I'm asking you, the ICE has been training with IDF in Israel. So the Metropolitan Police. It's all undercover. It's all very well hidden. So, and Epstein was working as a Mossad agent or asset. We don't know if it was official role. It doesn't matter. He was as efficient as any other Mossad agent and had a penetration no one had with royal families. Who knows? Big techs. And we're still to see with the Zionist press, which hasn't been revealed, but CBS from the files. They seem to have kept it very well hidden. So is American society recognizing this fact, the link between the violence that ICE brings in, the training in Israel, the Mossad, this aspect? Is there any possibility of awareness now in the U.S. society?
The U.S. public is not generally aware of anything of this kind. You have those who make it their business to learn about these things, and they know they're fairly well. It's possible to be fairly well informed about this, but all sorts of people ask me, "Where do you get your information?" So I tell them, but it's not when you have connections, and then those connections keep feeding you the information, and not everybody has those connections. So the U.S. public and the Western public in general are fairly oblivious of these facts. Now, the Israeli, actually, it was the League, the Anti-Defamation League, that for many years, for decades, has been offering at its expense training for law enforcement on the local level, at the national level, U.S. law enforcement, to go to Israel and learn the techniques of the so-called IDF and all this sort of thing. That's been going on for a long time. ICE is no different in that respect. And it's not a secret. It's just that the American public has very little interest in it. And they would say, so what? I think it's great that our law enforcement can learn more and have more at their disposal and free of charge. I mean, they will. This is how, by and large, the American public reacts to that. As far as Epstein being I would say he's a Mossad asset rather than an agent. It's not clear that he received funding and direction from the Mossad, but he absolutely cooperated and loved to cooperate with the Mossad and with the Israeli government and with the people in the U.S. government and so forth. I mean, he loved to hang around and be a means of introducing powerful people to other powerful people. That was his role. And so I don't think it's I mean the American public understands that he was a very corrupt element in U.S. society, and that he corrupted many government officials, but they expect their government officials to be corrupt. And they say, all right, so what? And they don't expect everything to come to light. And yes, it will be spoken of in the upcoming elections, and especially in the presidential election in 2.5 years. So those it will happen, but nothing will really be revealed during that time, because almost every politician in the United States has something to hide, and therefore they will not.
Well, if 99% is supported by Israel, so
Right.
the chances are that they all know Epstein somehow. The
Exactly.
level of
Yeah, it's bipartisan.
So it's going to be used as a campaign topic. The Republicans will try to tar the Democrats, and the Democrats will try to tar the Republicans, and it'll be a political football. But they won't reveal anything really dangerous.
And great for fascism, because in this way people lose their total trust in politics.
Right.
As we see here, I think Nigel Farage has to gain with the fact that Keir Starmer knew that Mandelson was involved with Epstein. We're going to talk about this tomorrow, the evidence that we have on Keir Starmer. So I think Nigel Farage will come up as the anti-politic guy. So
quite right.
Who comes? Where's the Trump?
So let's end on this wonderful note.
I have to go because I have an appointment now.
Yeah,
I'm
just ending, Sara.
Sorry,
let's end. Thank you so much, Paul. We ended on a note where we found harmony in the U.S. between the Democrats and the Republicans in the Epstein files. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on, Paul, and also for a very fiery conversation. I really appreciated you coming on. And Sara, yes, go for it, Sara.
Thank you, Paul, for once more making yourself available to share. I mean, Paul speaks Arabic, Paul speaks Farsi, Paul has lived in the Middle East and has a wealth of knowledge and militant experience. So thank you so much, Paul, for honoring our channel with this very vivid discussion, which I loved. You know, Ileana, I love this type of discussion. I
hope your audience.
Thank you so much.
I hope your audience enjoys it as much as we did.
We already have an interview on you. This will be our second one.
Everyone in the audience, please go check it out. It's an amazing interview with Sara and Paul. So go ahead. Thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you so much to both of you. Bye.
Bye. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Paul Larudee, and you can check out his interview with Sara. I'm going to put it in the chat. I'll also put it in the description below. But yeah, next week, we're actually going to have as a special guest, Ben Chaco, the editor of Morning Star. So Morning Star is the English-speaking socialist newspaper in the UK. I think the only one, if I'm not mistaken, that's actually English-speaking. So
yeah. Hope you enjoyed this week, Empire Watch Weekly Live. And next week, please join us. Spread the word. We'd love to get a little bit more on the algorithm. And yeah, I just want to end with this idea that at Ode to John Trendle says, yes, there are those who have always been awake, so to speak, and that can spread. And that is talking about the US. So hopefully that is true. I know a lot of anti-imperialists in the US. I mean, when I first started this show about a year and a half ago, I guess, I was like greatly inspired by a lot of independent media platforms and shows from the US. So I know that it's not as much as we get very frustrated, I think, with the level of propaganda and the barrage of propaganda and misinformation and everything. I think that it's a little bit hubristic to assume that there aren't incredibly inspiring fighters in the US, which there absolutely is, and there are in the UK as well, even though it doesn't feel like it, but there definitely are. So yeah, and a good point here saying that 5% is all we need for impact. We don't actually need all people. Okay, well, yeah, if we can get to 5%, that seems almost impossible right now, but no, it's totally doable. So we can totally do that. Okay, thank you everyone, and hopefully see you next week. Bye.